So with that, we're going to move to talk about the plan for increasing the in-person time for students in grades 10 through 12. Erin, are you going to share screen? Yep, perfect. So if you can go to the goals slide. What we're hoping to achieve today is to just basically talk about where we've been and, you know, how we got there, and, you know, talk a little bit about how it's gone this year, and then give an overview of the plan that we're currently working on to increase in-person instruction for those grades. And so everything, we'll talk about the proposed models, talk about some of the challenges that we need to overcome. I know that people want to see progress on this, and I think it's important for people to understand the challenges that we face, and then, you know, discuss what the plans are for moving forward. The next slide, just basically, this is something that you've seen. The next few slides are recaps, just to sort of bring you back to where we are. This is how we tried to focus our work as we were preparing for the reopening of schools this summer. So this graphic shows that we're trying to center our equity work, really doing the things that you've heard about today around really making sure that we had a strong, robust system of supports for our students who were intensive English language learners, has been a central part of the work that we've done, while maintaining safety, focusing on wellness, and trying to, you know, to keep our culture moving forward. So those were the central tenets of our organizing work. The next slide basically is what my recommendation was back in August that was approved. And I know that there are people that are asking the board to take action. The board can take action at any time, but I also just want to remind you that you already gave us the authorization to move to bring students back in, you know, that we would start in a hybrid model for all students, and that we would attempt to move to bring students back for additional time, which, you know, throughout the fall, we've been updating you on, you know, our thinking, and, you know, so we considered that and did not move forward with it back in October. We, you know, did work to have a plan for implementation in November, and decided to pull that back at that point. So just the next slide as the last of the recaps is, actually it's not the last. So this was what we called for in the programming for our 10th through 12th grade. So that's exactly what we currently have in place, with the, you know, the morning synchronous instruction followed by the learning center, with advisory built into to the day for students. And then the last thing that is important, just in terms of recall, is that we did not create a remote academy for our students at the high school level, because we were going to ensure that they were taught by somebody who was appropriately licensed, and we wanted to make sure that we continued to have the same programming that we were offering all of our other students, something that we would not be able to replicate in a remote setting in the same way that we've been able to do for our elementary and middle school students. So next slide, Erin, please. So just, you know, because I know that that it's important to get students back in school, but I just want to make sure that everyone in the audience also understands that this is not unique, that, you know, there are a large number of students across the country who are not in a school across all grades, but especially at the upper grades. So it is more complex to be able to bring students back in those grades. And this is, a recently released survey by Education Next that, looked at the percentage of students who are currently learning either in person or remote. And you can see that, there's actually very few students who are, learning in person on a full-time basis, and about a quarter of the students are in hybrid programming. So why are we now at this point? I think first and foremost is because we finally have seen the case counts drop to a place where it's realistic for us to have a conversation about bringing students back. As you recall, when we pulled back in November, it was grounded in a groundswell of concern about the cases that we could see down the road. And, as you hear people today and know that there are a significant number of people who want us to tackle this, which we are absolutely doing, we had that same dynamic at work back in November in the opposite direction. So I do think it's important for, to ground us in the fact that we are where we are and that it's different from where we were in November. And that's why we are tackling this at this time. So I want to walk through a few other slides that help to set the reason why it's important for us to be doing this work now. So first of all, it's, we are looking now at our attendance and how it compares to last year's attendance, and we can see that it's considerably worse in general at the district level. So, this is for all grades. Our attendance, the percentage of students who were chronically absent last year and the percentage of students who are chronically absent this year. And next slide, Aaron. So we also look at this just at the high school level, and you can see that it is, that it's also true at the high school, but probably not as dramatic as you think. But it also is probably grounded in the fact that our attendance at the high school has been problematic all along. So there's not the same dramatic increase that you see in the district as a whole, but that's probably more result of the fact that in the high school, our attendance was already problematic. But it's interesting to look at, sort of to this topic of in-person instruction, that when you look at the, can you go to the next slide, Aaron? Thanks. So this is the 9th grade attendance. You can see that it is, it's not great. It's better than the district average for several of our groups, for most of our groups, not for Native, not for white, or for our multiracial students, but otherwise this, the attendance for 9th grade tends to be slightly better than it is for the district as a whole. But when you look at the next slide, which shows you 10th through 12th grade, you can see here that it is worse for the, it is considerably worse for all groups at the 10th through 12th grade, except perhaps for Native and white students, where, so I think that there is reason to believe that our attendance at the upper grades is, being influenced by the fact that there is relatively little in-person instruction. So the next slide looks at a group of students that we've focused on that are the students that we consider to be deeply disconnected. So these are the students that have missed upwards of 25% of their classes to date, and are also failing some classes. So, you can see here what the data looks like. And, again, there are equity concerns for us that come from looking at this data. The way that this is structured is that you see for each of the schools the actual composition of the school. So that's the bar underneath that does not have the two Ds, and then what the percentage of students who are deeply disconnected, what the racial makeup of the student body is. So you can see that, particularly where you look at the Latinx population in particular, it is, at both Deering and at Portland High School, it's a very significant portion of the population, much larger than what that group is in the enrollment at the school. So we're going to look a little bit more at, just in general, how students are doing earning credits. So this slide shows you for each of the schools for both 2019 and then for this year, the percentage of students who are not earning credit in the classes in which they're enrolled. And so you can see that this is a little more the pattern here is a little harder to discern, because you can see that, and I think what this tells us is that the pandemic has a negative effect on all students, regardless of whether they're in school in person or not, because you can see across the board that it is that the percentage of students who are earning credit this year is lower than it was last year, but that's true also for the students who are in person for 2 days a week. Our ninth grade, you can see the same pattern of performance for them that you can see for the students in grades 10 through 12. When we look at this in the next slide, where we're actually looking at the racial breakdown of this performance, and this is only for grades 10th and 12th. And this is a lot of information to digest, but the table up at the top tells you what the actual racial ethnic composition of the school was last year and is this year. And then you can contrast that with the percentage of students who are not earning credits. And you can see there that, again, here, you'll see that the percentage of students of color who are not earning credits tends to be the place where the most significant impact is being felt. So that's sort of leading us to this conclusion that we absolutely need to figure out how do we increase the in-person time and make things better for our students. And so I'm going to ask Assistant Superintendent Townsend to walk through the model as it's currently proposed for both the two comprehensive high schools, so that's the first model, and then the different model that's being proposed for Casco Bay. So, Aaron?
Good evening, everybody. So I'll review this quickly. This is the proposal that looks, fairly similar to where we were in November, particularly for Portland High School. It's a bit different for Deering High School, in part because, as the superintendent will talk about later, some of the additional mitigation strategies around testing that we're exploring would require us to have a more structured afternoon experience. So given those concerns, this model has, for the two comprehensive high schools, keeps in place the 4 days of synchronous virtual instruction in the morning. We've extended the travel time a bit during the middle of the day based on feedback from students and families about the tightness of that time in terms of being able to transition from home learning to the school environment. The afternoons would be organized such that all students would have access to an additional class period once a week. On Monday and Tuesday, it would be their block 1 or 2 classes. And on Thursday or Friday, it would be their block 3 or 4 classes. As you can see, there's additional time for guidance or advisory and learning center opportunities built into this time as well. Excuse me. Just the summary kind of what I've said as you looked at the model in terms of what this means for students at those, at the two comprehensive high schools. Since that time we have, been able, when we've been able, because we spent a period of time when we were in a yellow designation in the state color coding in which there wasn't in-person clubs or activities or extracurriculars. But those have actually been scheduled, some after school and some in the morning time as well. So there have been a variety of strategies to try and have students have access to those. The Casco Bay model builds off of the structure that they have had in place throughout the fall, in which all students have access to their virtual daily schedule of virtual classes. So in this proposal, that would continue for both 9th grade as well as 10th grade, 10th through 12th grade students. So at Casco Bay, primarily the instructional delivery has been for all students has been virtually, and the in-person time is focused on crew and team learning activities. So in this model, that would increase for 10th through 12th graders so that they would have 4 to 5 hours per week of instruction, and depending on their grade level, that would be which day that would be. As you can see here, 10th grades would have the access to that on Monday and Tuesday, and then 11th and 12th grade on Thursday and Friday. So these are the general models, trying to find a bit of the balance of some of the challenges that the superintendent will speak about in terms of being able to increase the opportunities for in-person instruction while mitigating some of the concerns and challenges we have in terms of bringing all students back in a more traditional hybrid schedule at this time. But these are what we have begun in terms of engaging with leadership teams at the different schools, the starting point for our conversations with them. So, Superintendent?
Yeah, next slide, please. So before we move to the challenges, just a little bit more sort of comparisons to just help to frame this for you. In terms of where we currently are in relation to where we were prior to the pandemic, this is for Portland Public Schools. Pre-pandemic, we had roughly 30 hours of in-school time on a weekly basis. This year, the in-person portion of that, as you know from the conversations about the high school, it's variable. It depends to what extent students are coming in for learning center. So we're not, we can't say there that they're spending any specific amount of time. It's variable across, schools and at the individual level. And at the middle school and at the elementary school, we're currently having roughly 10 hours of in-person instruction on a weekly basis. Then if you sort of think about not just in-person, but what is synchronous instruction, so that's time where you're not off to on your own, but you're actually working directly with your teacher and your class to some extent. Currently, our high schoolers have 12 hours of synchronous instruction our middle schools have 14 and our elementary schools have 11. That additional hour is Wednesdays, a check-in with their homeroom, and so that accounts for that additional hour over what their in-person time is. And then under this proposal, we would actually have, at the high school level, we would have 16 hours of synchronous instruction, of which 4 of those hours would be the in-person time. So that's to frame a little bit how this is organized. And then I just wanted to sort of highlight some of the local area districts. The next slide, Aaron. So this is comparisons with some of the neighboring districts that we've been talking to and learning about. And so I think it's important to note that all of them use a 6-foot distancing. I know that that there's been some discussion about that. The only one that doesn't at this time is Freeport, and then you see the number of days that they have in person. And I do think it's important to talk about the what happens during the remote time, because I think, back to the previous slide where you saw the total number of hours that are synchronous for our students, that isn't necessarily the case across the board in some of these other settings where, there are situations where the remote days are completely remote without any connection to the teacher, or you may just check in at the beginning of the class and get assignments. You look at Yarmouth, where they are doing every single one of the classes is also available to students, and same is true at Westbrook. But otherwise, it is very much discretionary to what extent the remote days, the days that the kids are not in school in person, they're getting any kind of asynchronous instruction. So I think that's an important point that we wanted to highlight. So wrapping up then around the, before we get into the concerns, the challenges, we talked when we opened about this notion of layering precautions. We're continuing to do that. And so we have the 6 required, if you can go to the next slide, Aaron. The 6 that were in place at the start of the school year: the symptoms checks, the physical distancing, the masks, the physical distancing and the improvements in facilities, the masks, the hand hygiene, the personal protective equipment, and the quarantining whenever there is a case. Those will continue to be in place. And as Aaron mentioned earlier, we are looking at the possibility of implementing pooled testing in our schools, so that once a week students and staff would be tested, and then we would make decisions about whether a particular cohort needed to be quarantined and not be in person. So that is due diligence that we're in the process of working through with our district physician and our head nurse and different vendors who are able to do that now. So I'm going to now move into the things that make this challenging, and many of them are things that you've already heard before, and so there's, I'm just going to be repeating things that you're familiar with. So first is the CDC guidance. Even the most recent guidance that was released by CDC speaks to having 6 feet of distance whenever possible. I mean, there is the exception that, if it's not possible, but in terms of the desired level of separation between students or between students and staff, it continues to be 6 feet. I'll talk a little bit about our data and the state's data, the small, uneven classroom sizes that we have as a district, the remote academy structure, which is problematic for us for a number of reasons, and the many staff that have accommodations that allow them to be remote, which presents an additional staffing challenge for us to be able to provide in-person instruction. So I'm going to go through each of these a little bit. So the next slide. You know, as I mentioned, the most latest guidance from the CDC reiterates that physical distancing, at least 6 feet, should be maximized to the greatest extent possible. That's a direct quote from the most recently released CDC guidance. It says in that guidance that in-person learning for elementary schools is likely to have less risk of in-school transmission than for middle schools and high schools. So again, you know, this is reiterating one of the reasons why we've been careful about this is that, you know, the risk for transmission is higher in high schools. And then, you know, it specifies that students, teachers, and staff who are at high risk of severe illness should be provided virtual options. So that's a challenge for us to be able to actually provide that. So moving on to the levels of cases, you know, when you consider that we've had fewer students from the upper grades in school in person, you can see that the cumulative cases at the high school level have been really significant. So it's, you know, it confirms the fact that, you know, at the high school level for a number of reasons that you see, you know, higher concentration of cases. This is, you know, our data over the course of the year. You can also see that's true at the state level. So this is, you know, a screenshot from the DOE's Open Outbreaks report, which is visible on their webpage. And, you know, I think the screenshot has somewhere in the neighborhood of 16 schools, and the overwhelming majority of them, I think 12 out of the 16 are all high school. So there's, you know, the rest, there's a couple of elementary schools and in a couple of middle schools that are on that list. So again, you know, the caseload at the high school level has been more intense than it is. And, you know, just for, you know, and we have our high schools have all been in outbreak status at different points over the course of the year without having students back in person at the grades 10 through 12. So I think that, you know, you can look at that list and you see some of the schools that we highlighted in our comparisons slide earlier that are also in outbreak status. So it is a cause for us to, you know, to be cautious. So remote learning, we, as I mentioned, did not create a remote academy for grades 10 through 12 for a variety of reasons. First and foremost was because we solved for it by making all of our content instruction remote so that everybody would still be able to take the courses that they were going to take and have the teacher that they would have had if they had been in school in person. We did not have a way to be able to do that for all students and create a remote academy. There's obviously tremendous complexity in doing this with creating equivalent programming because of the credentialing requirements that are associated with the high school grades. And so it would likely require moving to synchronous instruction for students on remote days. So, you know, as we discussed in the example of those of our comparisons, you know, places where students are accessing that they have students who are considered all remote. Those students, for the most part, are you know, they're teachers are teaching the group of kids that are in front of them, and then the students who are remote are, watching on the computer, or they're getting assignments and then they're getting support after class, or they're watching recordings of the lessons. So those are all of, none of those are optimal ways to learn. And so that has been one of the significant challenges that we need to overcome. And then the last one of our challenges is the accommodations that we have in place. So this is a summary by by each of our high schools of the number of staff that are currently on full remote assignments, and then how many of those are classroom teachers that would require coverage. And then we also have in there just what we believe we have at our disposal at this point in terms of the staff that are currently in schools that could cover in those sections. So one of the challenges will be staffing up to be able to cover those classes where the teacher is going to be remote and the students are going to be in person. So in those cases, we will need to have somebody in the classrooms to facilitate for the students and to, provide the classroom oversight while the teacher is doing instruction remotely. And so you can see that for both Portland and Deering, there's a pretty significant number of folks who are currently granted accommodations, which, those are all legitimate accommodations. They've gone through careful vetting with our HR staff, with an HR consulting firm, and our attorneys before those were granted. So that's a significant number of staff that we need to figure out how do we solve for the fact that they have these accommodations. And so we'll move to the next steps slide, Aaron. Thank you. So this is, as Aaron described, work that's already it's already going on. We have gotten a lot of parent feedback, a lot of it by email. We've had a focus group session with some of our multilingual parents to understand their desires, which I'll say are very consistent with what we're hearing from others in terms of their being concerned about the lack of learning that is happening this year, and concerned about the fact that their kids are falling behind. So we have a health and safety task force. That's something that is part of the contract, the memorandum of understanding that we agreed to with our ed tech and teachers unions, and that group is meeting tomorrow. I asked our student board reps to help working with our principals to organize focus groups of students at all three of the schools so that we would be able to walk through the plan as it currently stands and get their feedback, understand what their concerns are, and begin to solve for those concerns. And we started today our meetings with building leadership teams at Casco Bay and at Deering High School, and then we're scheduled with Portland High School on Thursday. And as I mentioned earlier, we're currently working through the vetting of all of the added testing options that are possible for us to pursue. So that's kind of the bulk of it. I have 3 additional slides in here that I'm not going to really walk through unless you have questions about the budget for CRF. I know that some of the questions that we got from members of the community were, what's happened to the money? And so we wanted to be transparent about that. So you have a slide that that you've seen before that does the total federal funding landscape for this year, how the CRF funding broke out in terms of what we used it for, and then a more detailed specification of of what that is. So if you have questions about that, I'll be glad to walk through them with you with Kathy's help. And I think that's it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Superintendent. Let's move to questions from board members, and I see Ms. Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Excuse me. I have some questions. Can you go back to the slide on the 3 hours online and the 1.5 hours in person? Is it possible to go backwards? We went by quickly on some of these.
That one?
No, the one that had the breakout by the schools that were the same, like Portland and Daring. It showed that it said the 3 hours AM online. One more, I think.
The actual schedule.
Yes, please. Yeah. Okay. So my question on this is, and again, I'm having a hard time, so I can see why some people are lost when I look at all these different schedules, but is there not a way to have that flipped in the sense of more in person versus the online? Is that not doable? So the time that you have here in the morning, could that not be in person? And then how you have the blocks in the afternoon, have that online? Is that not doable? And if so, why? Just wondering.
Aaron, do you want to answer that?
I think there are, particularly at the two schools that have the greatest space constraints in terms of having all, half the students in the building at one time. So this distributes, having some of the students there in the morning and some of the students in the afternoon. So in terms of the challenge that was referenced about the small and uneven classrooms, it allows us to be able to distribute the students in different ways. So that's one of the reasons. I think additionally, in terms of the supports and being able to give students the consistent access to the virtual instruction, that had been one of the values, in the feedback in the fall that students had named that was a strength at that time. Certainly conditions have changed, but that was one of the rationales, was to be able to maintain that consistency and not have the kind of dilution of the in-person versus the remote and the challenges that come with some of the remote, the hybrid instructional model that we've heard, where in terms of what students are able to access and experience on those remote days. So those are a couple of the challenges. I'm
probably being numb, and I apologize for my ignorance because I'm trying to wrap my brain around it. So, but I'm just trying to understand, nothing is the same anymore. So is there, I guess I'm wondering, I know you're saying about space constraints, but so you're saying for an hour and a half, they would only have an hour and a half in person, but they would have 3 hours in the morning online. Is that correct? Is that how I'm understanding it correctly?
Yes, that's correct.
So then, okay. So my concern around this is, one, the transportation, and have we done surveys with the families to find out how this may present challenges, because the in-person and then hopping on a bus or getting into a car or however finding a way to school to then be there for an hour and a half. And that's why I was asking about the flipping part of it, because they would have more concentrations of time. And I'm concerned about transportation issues. I don't think that even if you give them here just under an hour, how does that?
It's over an hour. It's an hour and 5 minutes.
Okay. So how does that line up with like the Metro schedule and how in families' schedules during that time of day, especially for those that are trying to work? I'm just wondering, that's why I was asking about the flipping, because it would seem to me that it would be easier to have more solid in-person time and then less. That's why I was asking about the flipping.
Yeah. And I think, to answer the transportation question, we added 15 minutes to that transition time to allow for plenty of time for students to make it on Metro from their homes to school. So I think that to answer that question specifically. And then I think I just have to go back to particularly what Aaron said about the, maintaining the synchronous time has been a priority for us. And, the only other way to do that, so if we brought the students back for 4 hours and, we did that, would mean that, we would not have the ability to provide a full day of, of those full 3 hours of in-person, not in-person, but synchronous instruction to both cohorts at the same time. So those kids that are in school on Monday would be losing synchronous instruction on Mondays. They would be getting in-person instruction on Tuesdays. But they would be doing anything from, homework during those 3 hours or, something else. They might be, if you go back to the, to the examples that we had there of the other districts, you can see that it's pretty, can you go to that slide real quick, Aaron? That it's a mixed bag, a lot of teacher discretion. So in those cases, you may have somebody who's actually teaching the class and the kids that are remote are actually listening in while the teacher has their mask on and is, speaking to a class of students. And, in other cases, they just check in at the beginning of the class and say, today we're going to be doing this. Those of you who are remote, you're going to do X, Y, and Z. And then the rest of us are going to do, whatever it is that they're going to do. So, I think that that's the challenge that we've been trying to balance is prioritizing that synchronous instruction, the coverage of the content during those morning hours, and having that happen every day for every kid.
I get that. I understand what you're saying with the synchronous. I think that the call is more so that they want, more in person. That's what I'm getting. But so when you're on the schedule here, the number of, so it says number of in-person days. So the number of hours for the other area schools, it says 2 in-person days for all, with Freeport the exception of 2.5. How many hours is that of those days? So they in for full days, they in for an hour and a half? When you say
they're generally in for a full day, not, so there's a couple of examples. It's not in here, but Wyndham, where they're done at, I want to say like 12:30 or something like that. I think Greeley is also in that same setting, but for the most part, these are full days, similar to what, our day is. So, from...
So to in-person, so I'm sorry, Javier, I didn't mean to interrupt. Can you go back to that slide? So in-person days, most students, so for Gorham, the 2 in-person days would be a start to end day in person?
Correct.
Okay, so that's not really apples to apples then when we're comparing us to them, because we wouldn't be.
We're not comparing us, right? I mean, we're not on this list.
Okay, well, I thought that's what we were looking at was comparison. That's all, because if it's an all day, it's if all of these are all day in person.
So ours would be 6 feet 0 and is remote time synchronous does not apply. Okay, I'm sorry. And then on the staffing considerations, you talk about classroom coverage, staffing, and the shortage there. Can we, if a teacher is the one that's certified and they're teaching from afar, can the people monitoring the classroom not be volunteers while the teacher teaches via computer, or do they have to be a certified teacher monitoring the classroom in person? Can we have people come in and volunteer to be in the classroom to kind of be there to make sure everything's going smoothly, and then you have the teacher teaching from afar? It doesn't have to be a licensed teacher, but it can be a volunteer. It has to be somebody who is a district employee. So we would need to, use substitutes. We would need to use, hire people to come in, but they would have to be vetted and, they would have to be employees. The people that we could rely on, volunteers are awesome, but, volunteers are volunteers.
Okay. I'm just wondering, and again, just bear with me, I'm not trying to be antagonistic at all, but I'm wondering where we had the old Portland partnership, we vetted volunteers through the background checks, etc. So my hope would be that maybe we could look at that if we could have a commitment from community members and or retired. I know that at the hospital we're bringing out retired nurses to do vaccinations. Could we not bring out retired teachers, to come in and
we would love to. That's we call those substitutes, and we would love to have more substitutes that would commit to coming in when we needed them. In these particular settings, it would be great to have people that would be there every day, as opposed to, a different substitute every day coming in, who would then have to figure out what is this class routine, who are these kids, and so on. So I think that, for us, we would love to have people that would be willing to do this. And if they would, we would pay them as substitutes to come in and cover. That's what it's going to take for us to be able to do this.
So if those that are home listening now, the 140 some odd people or whatever it is now, if they can rally and make a particular cohort of people that will come in on a regular basis and make a commitment, we don't have to necessarily pay them. They could volunteer.
No.
Have to pay them?
Yes.
We have to pay them. Okay.
Yes. That's not the issue for us.
No, I'm not saying the payment is. I'm saying it's sounding more like a commitment, the time commitment. Correct. Okay. So that is an option if we could pull it off. No.
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. Absolutely it is. Okay. And then if this is the same plan that we talked about in November, and I know we had to pull it back. Is there a way that we could implement this immediately? And if not, why?
And all of those challenges that we talked about. So, getting which classrooms are going to be used, which classrooms are not going to be used, finding the staff to fill those classrooms, working through the sort of the challenges underneath the challenges, like, today meeting with the Deering High School leadership team, there's a significant number of, details underneath these high level challenges that we need to work through. And that's where, I'm being very clear that we don't have all of those details worked out. We don't have a contract for testing. We have not begun to address the concerns that that our teachers have raised. We've not had conversations with our students. Before November, we had 500, 800, I don't remember how many people signing on to letters saying that they didn't want to come back. So, all of those things are the work, and that's what we're in the process of working through right now.
So what are we looking at for timing?
I don't have a time frame. It's going to take what it's going to take for us to be able to do that. Accommodations.
So at what point, I know that some that you said were fully vetted through HR, et cetera. At what point does something no longer become an accommodation? So at what point do we have to get to for the accommodations to be no longer applicable?
I don't know. Is Barb here?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah. Can you, I don't know the answer to that.
So much of that, I mean, if it's an ADA accommodation, that's a medical accommodation. And so until we have something from staff's medical provider saying that they could return, it could be when people are vaccinated, it could be, I don't know what it's going to be. So I don't really have a clear answer for that. Some staff have flexible work arrangements. that are not ADA based, and those ones we could certainly look at.
Okay. I would be interested to know at what point, if we could find out at what point do accommodations no longer, that you have to come back now to work under X circumstances, because if we're waiting for, say, hypothetically, we had 100 that have accommodations and they all have to be vaccinated before they come back, is that the threshold, or is it that they have to have, certain space set up? I mean, I know that there's variations, but I'm just kind of curious as to at what point do accommodations change? So, and then I have 3 more questions. So the freshmen, my understanding, stay the same, the number of hours currently, superintendent? Okay.
Correct.
But what about the classes that freshmen have with upperclassmen? How would that work?
So it would be, that's the sort of the layer underneath the challenge. I mean, the way that currently works is, for the most part, the students who, we have 9th graders who are in school, and then they are taking, classes that are with 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. They're taking those remotely. Mm-hmm. So those students, in theory, could then participate in the afternoon session in person, so they could stay on for that, or they could do it remotely if we decided that was the way that we were going to provide that. There's challenges with that. Some of those kids are taking, and this is true for 10th, 11th, and 12th grade students. They're taking college classes that they, that they're taking in the afternoons because they aren't coming in for learning center. Instead, they're taking college class. If we offer this in-person instruction in the afternoon, for some of those students, that's going to be problematic. They won't be able to make the afternoon classes and keep their college classes. So those are all of the sort of the challenges underneath the sort of the broad challenge of remote instruction.
And then you mentioned the membership of Health and Safety Task Force. You mentioned this, I'm sorry, a Health and Safety Task Force. What's the membership of that? Is it administrators?
It's Mr. Townsend, Ms. Stoddard, and then representatives from the 2 unions.
From the 2, I'm sorry, what, 2 units?
Unions.
Unions, okay. And so is there a possibility that we could expand that a little bit to include students and or parents?
That is part of the memorandum of understanding that we signed with teachers union back at the beginning.
Okay, so it has to stay within that restrictive membership?
Yes.
Okay. And then last 2, focus groups. You talked about focus groups for the students. Can we, in conjunction, because I think we all obviously heard from some fantastic students this evening, and one of them almost had me in tears for sure. But the focus groups with the students, but also can we do focus groups in conjunction with the students, with the parents, and try to...
What do you mean in conjunction?
Well, you have that, I don't have that slide in front of me, but the one that you were talking about, the different steps, the membership, the Health and Safety Task Force, and then you were talking about focus groups.
I guess just my question is, what is in conjunction? Do them at the same time?
Simultaneously. When you're doing the focus group with the students, can we not be doing something with the parents as well? Or the families? I don't have that slide, so I'm sorry. I'm going from my notes here that I put down.
If you're asking, can we have parent focus groups? We can. I actually feel very clear on where parents stand on this issue. So I'm not so clear on where students stand on this issue. So that's why I have it as a green, because I feel very clear on, by the emails that we've received, by, the testimony that we've heard. I don't necessarily think that there's much that I'm going to learn in those focus groups. So that's why we did not include it. We had a parent focus group with members of the multilingual community because we had not heard from them, and we wanted to have a better understanding of where their thinking was on this issue. But, I don't feel like there's a ton to be learned from having a focus group with the same people that have been emailing us their concerns.
Okay. And my last question for now is, one of the slides that talked about elementary, that there was less transmission, and it was increased more at the high school level. I don't know where someone's going with the slides here. So the elementary, if less transmission, yes, okay, likely to have less risk. So can we not, I know that there's some people that chimed in a little bit about elementary. So if this is the case, the people that are advocating for more time for elementary, have we been looking at that? And I know that you're looking at every angle, every which way, but do we have an idea of where we
So
could
I mentioned in my comments that Assistant Superintendent Nally was going to talk about some of the work that we're doing around improving instruction for students at the elementary and middle school as well. So we're going to do that at next week's update.
Okay, so more for in-person, not online.
We'll deal with broadly with what it is that we're thinking for middle school and elementary school.
Okay. All right. I think that's all for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Ms. Bondo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to give our student the opportunity to go first, and I will go right after them. Yes, please.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bondo. Ms. Chung?
I have a question about, with the new model, when we're adding the in-person times, we've substituted the blocks, like our classes, instead of Learning Center. And I was wondering why we made that decision. I know that there's been a lot of criticism so far I've heard from Portland and the Learning Center there on the inefficiency and the absolute failure. During a Learning Center, for me, at least, has been something that I found to be pretty successful. I know that there are definitely ways that we can improve upon it and get more accessibility for students who aren't able to access it. But I really enjoy like the flexibility of it, because it's not like every day I need to go see this teacher and I need to communicate with them about a certain task. Sometimes I want to maybe go to like AP chemistry the whole time. I want to go to music and have more choices. So I was wondering why we made that decision to switch it over to just instruction.
Primarily for the cohorting safety, for us to be able to ensure if we're going to bring everybody back, if it's not going to be just, a small number of people that are coming back because they want to, for us to be able to do that, we need to have tighter controls than what we would have under the other model. So that's the primary reason why we are making that. And again, to your point, these are the trade-offs, right? You would be able to come back for your AP chemistry class for one period over the course of the week, and you would not have the flexibility to come back for that, for 3 days during the week. So.
I just also note, Emily, that it's not completely eliminated. There is still time that 1:30 to half hour time of in-person learning time that's accessible. So recognize, we've heard that that's been a value, and I think there, and I think as well, I know been characterized by one person as in terms of the Portland High, but I don't know that that's consistently been the experience of Focus Learning Center experience at Portland High.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Ms. Allen?
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So just to preface this, I'm going to do a quick comment, and I'm going to ask a question because I can't speak during public comment, so I'm just going to say it. So I am a 100% virtual student. I go to Casco, I'm a junior, and I feel that there were a lot of arguments that I heard from students and parents and even some teachers this morning that really went against what I feel and that is we should not be increasing the amount of in-person learning time this close to the end of the year, because in 6 weeks or a couple of months, when we have to deal with the repercussions of increased learning time and the rise in COVID cases, it'll just make returning to school in September harder. And believe me, like, I want to be back in school just as much as the next person, but I also think that a lot of people are coming from a privileged place. Like, I am privileged as well. I have nobody who's high risk in my house. I am not a minority. I do not have to worry personally about getting sick and like the effects of COVID, but I know that a lot of people do. And so I just think that there are other ways and other resources that we can use to help students with mental health issues that don't include, you know, putting other people at risk. And I also feel like a lot of the resources that we are using to like increase in-person learning time can also be used to make virtual learning more accessible and like easier, because I know as a remote student it's not always easy, and I feel like remote students who are going to stay remote have like less opportunities, obviously. Well, I mean, that's just a consequence of it, but less opportunities than in-person students do. And so that's what I have to say about that. And I hope you take that into consideration. And my question is, what kind of training is given to teachers in regards to virtual learning? Like, is there any kind of training at all?
So that's what Ms. Nally is going to cover at next week's meeting in terms of the stepped up training that we have been putting in place for that purpose.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Ms. Hill.
Okay, sorry. Whoops. I'm sorry, I just turned my camera off. Anyways, I just wanted to kind of jump off of what Haley had said. And I am just talking in past experience as a student that has struggled with mental health issues long before COVID has happened. And being in school was partially one of the problems at some time. And I know that definitely doesn't say anything as to what we're going through now, but it was definitely an issue. And we can't blame COVID on our health issues. It's definitely a factor. But I mean, I wonder where the push for mental health resources is, and why haven't students been pushed to these resources before? It just makes me really wonder about the resources that we have throughout our school system. Like, as of right now, definitely. That's basically all that needs to be said. It's just, yeah, that's it.
And I'll say a couple things, and I don't know that I can completely answer that. I think one is that we have emphasized in our school reopening plans. If you look at everything that we've said and have tried to follow through on, is focusing on those relationships and focusing on providing social emotional supports to students. People are working super hard, and they're at capacity. And so, I think that we have all of the resources that we need to provide the mental health support for our students. No. When you look at our budget request coming in a couple of weeks, there will be additional social work supports that need to be built into it. Today, we talked about some of the additional supports that need to be in there to support our English language learners. And, so I would agree that we don't have the resources that
exactly. And the truth is, those aren't the only resources that we don't have access to. Throughout the entire Portland public school system, there are so many resources that we don't have access to. Mental health being not only the only one. Like English language learners, that's something that needs to be addressed more, but it's not, there's a lot of different factors to it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ms. Hill. Ms. Bondo. Ms. Ellen, did you have more you wanted to say? I see your hand is up.
Oh, no, that's my bad. Sorry.
No worries. Just wanted to check. Ms. Bondo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. Wow. Well, I have a couple of questions here, Superintendent. On that slide for the disconnected students, I just want to make sure if it's all levels students, I mean, from elementary school to, I mean, K to 12 or just the high school?
This is just high school.
All right, so I look at it as I just want to know, were we able to do something about knowing what's going on with those disconnected students?
We have.
Do we know the challenges? Why is a lot of disconnection? We heard about social emotion. We heard about motivation. Is anything more deeper, but then we are not aware about it because this is something serious. Yeah.
We and Aaron or Malia, you can also jump in. We have a team that is working on this. This is the primary work of our of our school-based student intervention teams that, the principals, assistant principals, and social workers and other staff is looking at identifying who these students are and trying to figure out what are their specific circumstances that that we need to support them with. So, I think this goes to what Ms. Hill was saying, in terms of what are the, sort of understanding at the individual student level, what are their needs, and trying to address those specifically. But, I think this is why we came to this realization. Our social workers brought it to us. They said that there are, a large number of students who were just not able to reach, where you heard from Ms. Allen that, that remote learning is working okay for her. There's some kids for whom it's not working at all. And so that's what this, that's what this slide shows you, that we have a group, a fairly substantial group of students who, were struggling very much to be able to reach.
Okay, I have a sub question. How frequently are we getting those reports? Because we as a board, we just come after a couple months to get that we have that specific student be disconnected, and we're coming almost at the end of the year school. So I see as a parent, then we are failing this part of students. So I want to know how frequently are we getting those information to try to make sure, because right now, if I heard you well, is that we need to figure out who are those students. And then we already in February. And then we coming at the end of the year in a couple of months, 2 or 3 months. So how frequently we had those information. And if you have an idea of the time frame, then it really left for us to figure out who are those students and how we can bring them some more support.
Because I just want to underscore that is the work that we've been doing all year. Okay. This number could have been 400 students, if not for the work that our school-based teams have been doing to meet the needs of these students. So in terms of how often we have these reports, it isn't a point of like having more reports or more frequent reports. It's a matter of doing the work at the school level, which is what our principals and their support teams are engaged in at all times. This particular report is fresh. We just got this, we first had to have, grades, right? As well as a significant number of days, so that we would have a significant number of days missed. And so, it isn't so much that this is like the most recent report, but we could have run this at any time and it would have been a different number of students. And this is the work that we're engaged in doing. And again, it could be 400 students and it's 120.
Okay. So while asking those questions, because I'm just going back what Mr. Thompson just mentioned about flipping those hours, because when I look at it, we have a lot of we have some students be disconnected for a long period of time to be on remote learning, because those are the high schoolers. So we have those hours about thinking about the flipping idea that she brought earlier. Why is not making a sense to us to be more realistic to have those students earlier in the morning? Because my impression and I have, those students, they will be motivated to be on the remote for 4 hours of the morning and having that transition coming the afternoon. Are we going to have more students, or we may have less motivated students coming for the afternoon class?
I think it's going to be different for every student. I don't think that I have a stock answer that is going to say, like, everybody is going to be more motivated to come in the afternoon, or everybody is going to be more motivated to come in the morning. The challenge that we're trying to solve for is the fact that we believe that in general, it's better for students to have more in-person time than what we've been able to give them. And we now feel that we're in a position to be able to do that because the case count is much better than it was, a while back. So that is what we're trying to do. I would not be here to say to you that by adding 2 hours of in-person instruction, 2 times a week, that we are going to solve that 120 student number that we just looked at. That continues to be, the work that we need to figure out. Why are those 120 students not, coming to school? Why are they not passing their classes, and what can we put in place to support them?
Yeah, so I'm going back.
So to answer the question of why not flip, I have to go back to what we said to Ms. Thompson, and I don't have anything else to add to that. If we do that, then, the students are not going to have direct instruction, synchronous instruction on their remote days. So they will actually be losing those 6 hours a week of synchronous instruction, and trading that in for 6 hours of in-person instruction.
And yes, and going with the learning center, I see we have some time between the remote and the in-person. The learning center will be by appointment, or is going to work in the plan frame here?
I think it's going to vary from individual to individual. It might be that on a particular day, you don't come to school until it's time for your first block period. I also that is not the set schedule. One of our schools is thinking of actually flipping it and starting with the block 1 and block 2, and then having learning center for students who want to stay after, in the same way that they do for the clubs and activities. So that shows you the time allocations. It doesn't show you the exact schedule that we would necessarily follow.
Yeah, but I try just to be more realistic here as a parent, as a mom, to look at the time between the remote, my child. Why I'm saying that, I just want to come to the aspect then we know it just depends on each child and each student. I'm a mom. Last year I had a high school student here. As soon we become to be on remote learning, he start failing classes. So I'm coming to that point to see the flipping options here, because how can we combine the learning center? Because since November, I've been seeing like the learning center is not working for everybody. So for me, I feel like it's not really a success program to have that learning center to that specific area, where we can maybe using that time combining so we can increase those in-person classes. And then having those 3:30 to 4, maybe having some guidance for some students who need help. So this is something that come on, because it's not working. I got people from the different community that have been sharing about those learning center. And if I remember last year, November, the report on that learning center attendance was not good. And I don't think so. Then we really have a good improvement either for this year. So I think something that we need to pay attention. For me, I feel like the in-person learning center, we can combine those hours to increase the in-person classes for our students. So something that we may talk about it. The last question that I have, Superintendent, is that when I look at our plan, I see some Portland High School and Deering have like a 1 hour and 30 minutes for the in-person. So do we have enough teachers? Because I see we have a lot of teachers from Portland High School on accommodation. Do we have enough teachers to be in that in-person setting, or is going to be a teacher in virtual and having a facilitator in the class?
The latter.
The latter. Okay, thank you. And one more last thing. I just want us to be transparent, because I heard you responding to Mrs. Thompson that we have some challenge and detail underneath, then we just don't know without having a time frame where we can have any opportunity for the students 10 to 12 to return in person. Can we be more transparent and realistic to the parents? Because the communication is so important. Because if we still have challenge and really small details underneath. So for me, I feel like we may not have any opening returning for 10 and 12th grade sooner than later.
I guess, it's not our intent to not be transparent. I would argue that it's less transparent to say we're going to do it by a certain date and then not be able to do that. And so that's what I'm trying to avoid. I'm being very transparent about the fact that I don't know what I don't know. And I'm trying to figure out what it is that I don't know and solve for that. And, as we get a better understanding, we'll be in a better position to give you a time frame for, coming back. But I am resisting saying we're going to do it by such and such a date, because I don't know that I can solve for all of the challenges that we know are underneath the sort of the labels at a date certain. So that's the truth.
So those are my sub-questions. So those details, you have to work with the school leaders in particular time. So how did you see that work going forward for next? Because we don't want to stay here having parents and coming next time we still don't know what's going on. So what's the next step to go more to the details on those challenges? What's your idea? Little plan, then you may think, okay, this is something that I'm thinking to have the school leaders to work with more details, so we can start having a little more picture of what's going to happen in the next, maybe in the end of the month or maybe next month.
Yeah, and that's where I'm resisting giving you those dates. I'm telling you exactly what I have scheduled. I had, meetings today with Casco Bay and Deering's leadership teams. We have another meeting scheduled with the Portland leadership team on Thursday. We have the meeting with the Health and Safety Task Force tomorrow. We're trying to get meetings scheduled with student representatives as soon as possible. And once we have that, we'll have a much better understanding of what the universe of issues are, and we'll be in a better position to tell you what it might look like to solve for those issues. So that's unfortunately that's the best I can do right now.
Thank you so much, Superintendent. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm done.
Thank you, Ms. Bondo. Mr. Rodriguez, and just so the board members know, after Mr. Rodriguez, we're going to go to Mr. Youssef and then Ms. Russell Butter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Where to start? I guess in the spirit of being transparent, I just want to clarify something, and I really don't mean for the superintendent to respond to this, but I'm a little bit troubled by the framing of what happened back in November and saying that we decided to pull back our plan. As I recall, we were committed to that plan, and that plan had the support of the board. And it was not advocacy from students or parents that made us change direction. It was an ultimatum and a threat that made the superintendent change his decision. So I just want to be transparent about that. Second, what we've learned about the experiences of many of our students in our schools, absent the pandemic, is that our schools don't work for every student before the pandemic. And so to blindly or holistically advocate for all students to go back to school without acknowledging that our schools are a great source of pain for a number of our students misses the mark by a long shot. Of these deeply disconnected students that have been chronically absent, I assume they belong to that group who normally don't feel that they are engaged, acknowledged, and respected in our school buildings. These are the same students that I have been speaking for in our meetings for the last 5 years, as I have spent time with them over the last 5 years, visiting our schools and getting to know them. I believe the Student Allegation Social Media Report strongly backs that idea. I know that this does not represent the entire population of our students, but it is a significant number of them. And I suspect that they are probably who make up these deeply disconnected students. Second, or I'm probably on my third point at this point, I'm a little bit, what's the word? I'm something. An emotion has been triggered by the suggestion that we have students in our schools while teachers are remotely providing instruction. A suggestion that I can translate into having unsupervised students in our high schools. I'm troubled by this suggestion in the backs of a conversation that we had last year of how incredibly important it was to have police officers police our students in our schools. So I wonder which students we're thinking are going to be in our classrooms being unsupervised with a TV screen on the wall providing instruction. They must not be the students that needed to be policed last summer. Next, as Ms. Hill said, if we are going to bring students back into our buildings while acknowledging the great deal of mental health issues and the depression issues and all the other negative effects of the pandemic without providing the proper supports for it, how much are we really acknowledging those issues? To me, personally, while I support this plan and I appreciate the difficulty on giving us specifics because of the many moving parts, and as Superintendent Botana said, we don't know what we don't know, I still see this as a very bland adding time just for the sake to add time. And I don't have a problem with that, honestly, because I think that this helps us set up for the fall, for September, where the picture should be way more favorable to have all students back into our schools. So I see this plan as a good way to prepare us for the fall. And I see it as, again, a dynamic plan, something that's going to change and shift as we learn more details. I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez.
Just very quickly, just make sure that it's clear, because we never suggested that the classrooms would be unsupervised. We said that there would be a facilitator in all of those classrooms. So just want to make sure that that's
yes. I knew you were not the one that made that suggestion. That was made by someone else.
Mr. Youssef. And thank you so much, Mr. Rodriguez. Mr. Youssef, you're muted.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Superintendent. I know the CDC stated that vaccination is not a condition for reopening, but I believe that having the vaccination as an urgent and prioritized will help teachers to be more motivated. So I was thinking if we can add that to the next step, pointers that you mentioned, and advocate for that. The other thing on page, I think, 17, when we compare the in-person hours per week for high school and elementary schools. So current in-person, we said variable, and synchronous instructions, isn't that supposed to be higher than those students who already have 10 hours in school, in person? So high school students, shouldn't they have to begin with higher synchronous instruction time? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, they currently have 12 hours of synchronous instruction to the extent that they're coming in for Learning Center for in-person instruction. That would be over and above that 12. So that the reason that we just said variable there is because not every student is coming in. And, as you heard Ms. Chung talk about the fact that maybe she comes in, 3 times for one of her classes over the course of the week. So in her case, it could be up to 15 or 18 synchronous hours over the course of the week. But for somebody else who doesn't come in at all, it would be 0. So that's why we just left it at variable. But the 12 synchronous is the fact that 4 days a week, 3 hours a day, they have content instruction with their teachers, although it's remote, but it's synchronous.
Thank you. My last question for staff with accommodations. My understanding are staff with accommodation in high school higher than elementary school, and that's why we're not able to have enough staff in the school. And if that's the case, is the vaccination might affect the accommodation staff?
So let me just talk about the vaccines first. So we had on the agenda today a resolution that the board was going to act on to urge the governor and the CDC to prioritize classroom teachers in the next phase of the vaccine. We pulled that off so that we would have enough time to do that, but it is intended to come on to the agenda next week. So that will be back on the agenda. I lost my train of thought. The staffing. I do believe that proportionately it is higher than it is at the elementary, but Barb, you can answer that more categorically.
So I'd actually have to go back and look at the data. If we're looking at the number of requests, it is higher at the high school, but it's mixed. So, and when we look at what we presented last fall, those were the number of requests for flexible work arrangements. And so that's a mix of accommodations and other things. And, some of those were related to childcare. So there were all sorts of things mixed in those numbers. So to answer your question specifically about, people who needed to work remotely, I'd need to go back and look at the data.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Youssef. Ms. Russell-Better.
Thank you, Chair.
Oh, sorry. There you are. I lost you.
Hi.
You are here.
So, Mr. Superintendent, I just had one comment. I was remembering you mentioning when someone had a question about the focus group idea, and I know it was Ms. Thompson asking about more parent engagement, and I heard your response about feeling like you get, and certainly at this meeting we got the message from parents and through emails we have, But I just wanted to, I was just asking, how many students do we have? About 2,000, right? About 2,000 high school students. And I just want to be really clear that, you know, I mean, we're getting a lot of emails about this, right? But we're talking about tens of, you know, we're talking about, say even that high, like 50 or so emails. You know, we're talking about 2,000 families. And I just wondered, when you talked about talking to multilingual families, did you feel, and I'm sorry if I missed this, if you did share this anywhere, but do you feel like you got a sense from that community of parents? And I also don't want to all say that that's a singular entity, but just to get a little bit more of a cross-section in our community, do you feel like there was any messaging you received in those conversations that was different than what we're hearing otherwise?
I think it's in Malia, you were there too. So it's nuanced, right? Mm-hmm. I would say that they share the concern about, you know, the damage that this pandemic has brought to their children's education, and they want us to do more and better. But, you know, right now what we're talking about today is increasing in-person time, because in general, we believe that is, you know, that is better, not universally, but it is generally better. And so that's what we're trying to establish, while at the same time, as we talked about with, you know, the students who are deeply disconnected, you know, trying to figure out why are they deeply disconnected and what can we do to connect them back in. You know, as when Ms. Hill said that there's all of these other issues that we're not addressing, we know that, and we need to be able to address them. So I think that, you know, it's a similar concern, you know, and this is a solution that cuts across, but is very much just one part of solving the, you know, difficulties. You know, we talked earlier when we were doing the LOUD plan about the need to do additional recovery supports over the summer and ongoing. That shouldn't get lost, because that is, you know, that's also a part of this. So, you know, today we're talking about increasing in-person time, but we also are focused on, you know, reaching students and meeting their social emotional needs, you know, looking at the students who are deeply disconnected and understanding what we can do to connect them. And, you know, for all of our students, provide a better experience and recovery to the extent that we can, beginning as soon as possible this summer and beyond.
Thank you.
Javier, I would just quickly add, if that's okay, because I pulled up my notes in front of me, so that they are in alignment with what you just shared, but just to quickly say a few of the bullets directly from the notes in that meeting. The biggest challenges for parents I took down were technology and remote learning. And then the remote learning notes were about lack of support during remote learning. Parents are worried and wondered what will happen, understand safety, but education is a key priority, concerned about the widening achievement gap, parents losing trust that their kids will get a good education. Those were my notes from the meeting.
Thank you. So I think hearing that just helps me highlight the message, Superintendent, you just mentioned about doing better, like meeting needs, right? That's what I think our charge is. And that to me is so nuanced, right? So to validate all the parents and students that spoke tonight and that we get emails from, but also to say that for all of our families, if we're talking about 2,000 students, or, you know, the 10th to 12th is, you know, a smaller number, I know, but just like looking at that number, it's so nuanced what meeting mental health needs, what meeting education needs, right? Because people are experiencing this in this crisis we've been in for a year in such different ways. So I guess I just want to lift that up, that, you know, the messaging we're hearing from parents who are upset is totally valid. And we have many other families who are experiencing, and, you know, I've heard from families because I'm reaching out. They're not families who would necessarily email, but those voices are really important as well, as important. as any that are coming to meetings, right? But parents telling me that, their older student helps with their, younger students that are doing remote at school. Their, adolescents that are helping work outside the home. And that doesn't mean that these families aren't having all the same concerns, but is that the in-person request as it's not the same, but I think we can agree about wanting to meet needs, right? And that we're trying, and I see, Superintendent, you're saying in this plan, trying to meet needs with in-person, which I think, we all certainly see the suffering from not having that, but not everybody's experiencing that in the same ways. Mental health is huge. We had that hugely before, just like this crisis cracks open all of the places where we've been failing, right? But as Ms. Hill said too, some mental health, it's not better for some in school, and some it is. So I just wanted to lift that up and that nuance that this is very complex, and I want to honor all the families that have shared in their different ways. So thank you for sharing the piece from the multilingual. That helps me just, like I said, not a monolithic group in any way, but just to get one little piece of a community that we were able to connect with. So thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Russell-Vetter. Ms. Trevorrow.
Thank you. I was just curious about tonight. Are you looking for any guidance from the board on this issue tonight? Is there a next step for this? What's the?
Yeah, this was designed as an update. I'm, obviously, hearing your questions and comments is helpful in terms of, understanding what you're concerned about, which is part of the, sort of figuring out what we don't know. So I think it's helpful, but I'm not asking for any direction. As I, started at the beginning, I believe that I have the authority based on what you granted back in August to bring students back in a hybrid form when and if we can figure it out.
Okay. And so given that, I'm not sure you necessarily need us to make any kind of profound statements on this issue, but I just did want to iterate my support for the staff work behind this, and that I think it's well thought out and data informed. And it's something that is trying to navigate a course forward with influences of multiple constituencies, some of which are diametrically opposed. In the context of a pandemic, of an ongoing, a prolonged crisis under which our entire community is living. And those are not ideal circumstances to navigate any path forward. So I think it's important to remember that we can't have the same expectations for ourselves that we would under ordinary circumstances. And to me, probably the more important thing is, how are we going to get out of this? The expectation for today kind of is that, yeah, we're going to be set behind. But how are we going to climb out of it when we get to the other end? So to me, I just wanted to put that out there, that I'm okay with not having the perfect option, and trusting that our staff is navigating the best that they can do under far from ideal circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Trevorrow. Mr. Irish.
I think, thank you, Chair. I think a lot of my questions have been addressed. I might have a couple as we progress in this process, and Superintendent has mentioned the challenges with respect to rolling out this kind of plan, and that it's kind of ongoing and fluid. and I respect that to an extent. It looks like the plan that you've laid out, once you go through these, the health and safety committee and you meet with the students, is the schedule that's proposed, is that a breathing document based on your findings? And so that could be subject to change after you finish your report. And if so, once we have that kind of ruled, once you've made the decision to kind of put something in place, what will there be a time for which parents or guardians will be notified to the extent of that change?
Yeah, of course. And, I think that's absolutely right that we are engaging with multiple constituencies to understand, what are the challenges that are inherent in what we're proposing, trying to solve for it to the best of our ability. And then, as we've been doing throughout the year, coming back to the board and, updating you, letting you know this is where we are now. And, we continue to be committed to doing that on an ongoing basis. And we will do that, as soon as we have, this is, closer to our direction. And, when we have a plan, we will communicate that with our families in the way that we've done, the way that we communicated back in November when we were, moving forward, and the way that we communicated in October when we decided not to move forward with bringing the elementary students back for 5 days a week. So, I will acknowledge that our communication is never enough, and it's never, it never meets everybody's needs, but we absolutely will try our best to communicate where we are at all times with the development of this plan.
I'll just express some concern. I know it's been addressed in the short term, and this is, you might probably have the same answer to this question as I'm getting a lot of feedback, whether it's from emails or conversations, that some parents have indicated that, well, the year is almost over. We've, as Anna kind of alluded to, that we're not going to meet the perfect in the short term, despite everybody's desires to do so. And I guess some of their concern is we're planning right now for the rest of the year under the premise that in the fall, things might be better. And I guess I'm curious about your thoughts about what if they stay the course as they are today? Because I think we'd run into a lot of roadblocks because we'd be facing the same problems with school population and physical structures. What are your thoughts on if things stay the course now, what do we do in the fall?
Stay the course in terms of the
hybrid
COVID, or I think if things were exactly the same, then we would be close to exactly the same. But I don't think that that's true. I think that vaccines are going to be available, and that is going to change the dynamics significantly. I think that the back to slide, at the beginning, where the why now, the why we're doing it now is because we just now have gotten to a point where the cases are not overwhelming us. Every day you guys were getting emails from me with like, this is how many cases we had. This is how many, close contacts. This is how many people are going to be quarantined as a result of it. And, that just stopped a couple weeks ago. So now we're in a place where, we're sort of climbing out of the ditch and saying like, okay, it looks like it's safe to proceed. And that's what we're now engaged in. It's trying to figure out, now that it's safe to proceed, is it really safe to proceed? And then what does proceeding look like given all of these competing, challenges that we have? And so I know that it seems like it should be easy, but trust me, it's not like we're sitting around here, twiddling our thumbs. We're trying to figure out how to make something that is super challenging become real. And, it takes time and it takes these conversations and these processes to be able to get there.
No, I appreciate that. No, I certainly wasn't intimating that you're sitting back twiddling your thumbs. I understand the work that's been put into this process. And this may be a less than educated question, but I seem to remember somehow that there was an indication for schools, for students to return back to schools from the CDC with respect to 3 feet or 6 feet. I know we're following, and a lot of the other communities are following 6-foot rules. Is that 6-foot rule students to staff? And it seems like we're treating it students to students. And if so, have we done any kind of analysis on, well, I guess I'll let you answer the first one first.
So the state guidance, which was informed by the previous CDC, guidance back in the summer, was 3 feet, 3 feet when students are masked, and 6 feet when they're unmasked. So even in our elementary schools where we are adhering to just the 3 feet, when students are unmasked, so when they eat and things along those lines, then they need to be 6 feet apart. We've always had the 6 feet at the high school level because we interpreted anything that was over 14, 15 years old was an adult for the purposes of COVID. And that's why, the distance between adults had to be 6 feet. And that just had to do with the viral load and the likelihood that, a little kid versus an older kid would be able to spread COVID. So we've always used 6 feet. As you saw, most other schools are using 6 feet. For us, 6 feet is more complex because of the variable size of our classrooms in our older schools than what it is for Freeport High School or for Greeley High School to be able to do that. So I think that those are I think that's the challenge for us. And, one of the reasons why this has been, difficult. When we go back, kids are not going to be in their same classroom that they would be if we were, back to school. So, they may not be in room 207. They may be in the cafeteria. They may be in the library, or they may be in the gym for a particular class if we are not able to meet the 6 feet guidance in those classes.
Thank you. Sorry, it just dawned on me that it's 10:30. So I'll stop my questioning because I know that public has a lot to say. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Irish. Are there any other board questions? Mr. Burke.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really over this pandemic, and the pandemic's not over us. A priority for me coming into the school year since a year ago when we started planning for our return to school has been not to add to the death count of now 500,000 people. And I'm grateful that the rigorous planning that's gone on in this district, our layers of precaution, have not contributed to the transmission of the disease. I appreciate the work. It's hard for me not to get a little activated or offended when I see comments about district staff that they build graphs and they don't work hard or they don't care about our students. I have proximity and privilege of knowing how hard you, superintendent, and your staff work and how much you care about our students and how far you've gone to try to figure out this impossible puzzle. So I just want to acknowledge that. I've been incredibly conservative when it comes to in-person circumstances in my personal and professional life, and here as a school board member. I've been probably one of the most conservative board members in our approaches to in-person schooling. Just want you to know that you do have my support for moving forward in this direction. I know you already have that from our formal board votes, but just so you and others know what my temperature is at this time. And Javier, you have my support not only in this direction, but also generally speaking. You know that comes with my candor and my high expectations for you. And I want to acknowledge that you're doing the both and of following the ever-evolving scientific understanding of the virus, as well as doing deep engagement of a very dynamic stakeholder group across parents, students, faculty, staff, administrators, board members. There's nothing simple or straightforward about it. Perhaps most of all, I want to say to the students that have spoke up tonight, particularly the one person that said this might be the last time that they speak, I hear you. You matter. Your voice matters. Because we might not, and well, we won't immediately open schools tomorrow, doesn't mean that we don't hear you and I don't hear you. Unfortunately, I don't have the answers, and luckily there's a team much larger than me that is trying to go through these very complex circumstances and come up with a safe plan for us to be together to get students an education they deserve, and tend to the multifaceted nature of being a human being during a pandemic. And one of the hardest things as a parent here and as a school board member to do is just say, I don't have the answer and I don't know yet. And that's what's really up for me. I know that we can get through this together, though. And I'm just going to leave it at that for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Any other board members? I'll just say briefly that I share Ms. Bondo's concern about whether this plan will provide the motivation for students to come to school. I think Mr. Baton, I heard, Superintendent Baton, I heard your response to Ms. Bondo, but that's when I step away from this plan. That's my overarching concern. But I am deeply appreciative of all the work that's gone into continuing to figure out how we can best serve our students in the midst of an ongoing pandemic. While figuring out so many different plans for different scenarios as the pandemic evolved. I know, for instance, my fourth grader was sent home remote packets, so, several different times, thinking at points that we were going to go all remote for elementary schools, and just recognizing the changing nature of the pandemic, and also that we're at what appears to be a new place where cases are falling precipitously, not only in our community but more broadly around the country. And so it's finally some good news, but we're by no means out of the woods yet. So thank you so much, Mr. Superintendent. I don't know if you have any words to wrap this up before we move to public comment.
I'm anxious to hear public comment.
Okay. To all the members of the public that have waited 4.5 hours to hear this conversation, the superintendent's presentation, and to share your own views, thank you so much for being in there, for your patience and fortitude. If you've already spoken tonight about school reopening, we're not going to take your comments again. You definitely can email us. You can email the entire board through one email address, and that's schoolboard@portlandschools.org. That's, again, schoolboard@portlandschools.org. So if you haven't spoken yet, the way to indicate that you want to participate is to use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. You can find it at the bottom of the webinar window, or by selecting your participant name. And I will, once folks have their hands raised, I'll call on you using your Zoom name. Please start by stating your full name and your address, and then you'll have up to 3 minutes to address the board. So with that, we're going to open public comment. I want to thank Greg, who's been helping me move members of the public over to be and unmuting them. So Greg, thank you again. And we're going to start with Holly Sheehan. Holly, you have 3 minutes to address the board.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for allowing public comment after the superintendent's plan. It's much appreciated. I know that wasn't the original idea. So, Mr. Superintendent, I can only imagine the challenges that you have had to deal with figuring all of this out. I have a lot of empathy for you, for these challenges, and for all the teachers and administrators. And I feel like you really do care about the students and their needs and the damage that remote learning for our 10th through 12th graders is causing in the pandemic as it relates to their isolation, truancy, academic failure, and mental health. I'm also cognizant of the fact that it's been nearly a year for you to work on this, and you have done a lot of work at every grade level. But every other high school in Maine has found a way to get children, our 15 to 17-year-olds, back in school for instruction 2 days a week in a hybrid model, or nearly every. So Portland is the outlier, and the tide is turning nationally as Joe Biden and Dr. Fauci are pushing kids to get back to school. And the Maine CDC has stated that it is safe to have our children in school in person. I'm not okay that you do not have a timeline for implementing your plan. That should happen immediately. Your November plan, which I was so excited about back around Thanksgiving, and then the rates went up in COVID, and I understood why you suspended it. But that plan should happen now, immediately. And if you can't move forward to get our kids back in school, I would urge the members of the board who are elected officials to not defer to the administration, but rather please hold a special meeting to vote on a specific plan, and please do that now. Thank you so much for your time and for your consideration.
Thank you, Holly. Next, we're going to hear from Melissa. Melissa, you have 3 minutes to address the board.
Thank you. So my name is Melissa Malone Sotuyo, and I live on Hope Avenue in Portland. And my son actually attends Cheverus High School, but I have listened to most of the meeting tonight. I am a graduate of the Portland Public Schools, and the city of Portland schools mean a lot to me. And my son has a lot of friends that go to those schools, and so I am very invested in how this plays out. And so I thought I would share a little bit about what Cheverus has been able to do to create a successful plan for students to be back in school. They've been back in school 4 days a week for full days. I realize their enrollment is smaller, but their geographical space is also smaller. And the students actually have a choice whether or not they want to be in school or whether they stay at home and do schooling remote. So for those that do not feel safe, they are welcome to stay at home and do that. Temperatures are taken each morning when they go into school. And if the student leaves the state, then they must be COVID tested with the PCR test before returning to school. And I think, as the superintendent stated, if there's not enough space in classrooms, they do 6-foot spacing at Cheverus, and some of the classrooms are too small to accommodate all the students. And so they have an overflow set up in the larger spaces like the gymnasium, where all the desks are 6 feet apart, and the students still attend their class over Zoom while sitting in the gymnasium. And the students rotate through those overflows. So for instance, my son might have overflow once every fourth science class. They also eat lunch in their homerooms every day, 6 feet apart. And there have only been 3 cases of COVID at Cheverus all year. 2 of those cases actually happened during holiday breaks when students were with their families and not in school. The one case that did take place during the school year, or where they were in session, they did very close contact tracing, and they contacted all of the students who may have been in close contact with the infected student and asked those students to stay home and attend school remotely for 14 days. So I just wanted to offer it up as some suggestions. I think that they've done a really good job, and I think there are some things that could be valuable as the Portland Public Schools work on a plan to get these kids back to school, because it's very evident to me, as I am around a lot of these kids all the time, that, you know, the kids who are in school are definitely thriving compared to their peers who are not. Thank you very much for letting me speak. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Melissa. Next, we're going to hear from Joe Conroy. Go ahead, Joe.
Joe Conroy. I live on Pitt Street. My daughter's a junior at Portland High School. It's really discouraging to listen to all the things that we can't do. It's also discouraging to hear the school board, who are elected to represent the public and hold the administration accountable, push each other out of the way to cheerlead for the administration. Why are Portland's high schoolers the only ones in Maine who are being shortchanged so egregiously? Everyone agrees that kids need in-person connections to thrive and to learn. We believe that 2 days a week, a hybrid model would be a vast improvement, but 12 hours a week of remote class time, which is all that kids have been given all year, is sadly inadequate. Unless something happens very soon, this is going to be a lost year for Portland high school students. The proposal that's on the table, which doesn't even have an implementation schedule, seems like a ginned up version of Learning Center. And as far as I can tell, Learning Center has been a lot of smoke and mirrors. The materials indicate that kids have at least one in-person Learning Center appointment a week. Aside from the fact that it's not class time, that's not true either. For many kids, Learning Center has meant only a handful of brief appointments all year long. At the beginning of the year, we were assured that there was a plan for 10th to 12th grades, possibly as soon as October. All year long, someone has been moving the goalposts back when they think no one is looking. No other school district anywhere around is failing their students so miserably. I would implore the school board to examine these concerns, look at the evidence, and compel the administration to create meaningful change before it truly is a lost year. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Now we're going to hear from Mary M. Go ahead, Mary.
Hi, this is Mary Murphy. I live at 42 Pitt Street. My daughter's a junior at Portland High, and I'm a member of Back to School Portland. It's difficult for me to believe that this is still where we're at. An entire year of high school with less than half a normal schedule, trying to cover high school level material in 12 hours a week of all remote class time in the state with the 3rd lowest incidence of COVID-19 cases in the nation. In a state and a county where all other high schools have offered students at least a hybrid schedule, and in most cases, a closer to normal amount of instruction time, actual full days of school. We have been given many different and sometimes contradictory rationales for this situation, none of them convincing me that with creativity, commitment, and leadership, we can't do a better job for our kids. I'm sure most of you must be aware that the tide of scientific evidence and responsible public policy has been rapidly turning, with more and more support for making school reopening a priority, more and more understanding of the damaging impacts on kids and teens to be out of school. In an analysis of the commitment to keep K-12 schools open all year, at least on a hybrid basis in Rhode Island, and the encouraging results of that approach, the New York Times Magazine recently cited a study which looked at extreme positions across the nation in response to the pandemic. On one end of the spectrum, school districts with high prevalence of COVID-19, which chose to open regardless of safety concerns. And at the other far end of the spectrum, the 8% of communities where prevalence was low enough to make school openings safe under CDC guidelines, but which chose all remote learning anyway. Clearly, Portland's high schools fall into this latter extreme, described in the Times as an occurrence that happened primarily in progressive coastal regions with strong teachers' unions. I greatly value our teachers, and I belong to a union myself. I don't know the extent to which union negotiations have entered into the high school decision-making this year, but I see that teachers across our state and at all other grade levels in Portland have continued to show up and teach in person. What strikes me is the idea that a progressive community, which I like to think we are, would adopt this extreme stance. How is it progressive to not consider teaching a type of essential work? To fail to ensure an adequate education for our high school students? To deny them the benefits of Maine's relative safety? To ignore the state's fact-based assessment that we've been in green status nearly all year, briefly in yellow, and to treat our high school kids as if we've been in red status? How is it progressive to sit by as kids fall behind, failure rates climb, many students' mental health and emotional well-being decline, and some disengage from the education system entirely? How is it progressive not to notice that kids who are already disadvantaged will bear the brunt of these costs? How is it progressive to figure out a way for teens to participate in indoor winter sports but still not be able to go to classes? How is it progressive to have a city in which many teens manage to safely go to work but are not allowed to go to school?
Mary, your time has run out. Do you need an extension?
Could I have a very brief extension?
Is there a motion? I see Ms. Thompson, seconded by Mr. Irish, all in support. Okay, we have a majority in support. Go ahead, Mary.
Thank you. So just to wrap up, a rehash of November's plan, except this time with no implementation timeline, to add 2 40-minute sessions 2 afternoons a week is woefully inadequate. It is past time for Portland students to have at least some measure of equity with their peers in other Maine high schools. With that still not forthcoming from district leadership at this late date, we need our elected representatives on the school board to step up to the plate and direct the district to do better. If you truly want to represent this community, we are counting on you to use your power and authority and not continue to defer to this administration's extreme approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Next, we're going to hear from Avril Williams. Avril, the floor is yours. You have up to 3 minutes to address the board.
Thank you. It's Avril Williams, at 12 Glenwood Avenue. I'm kind of scratching a lot of what I had planned after hearing people and after hearing the presentation. I'm a parent of a junior at Casco Bay High School. And I want to start by thanking the school board. I know this is really tough work and tough circumstances, and recognize teachers as well. As a prior educator, my heart goes out to each one of them, and acknowledge parents as well, who are seeing kind of the aftermath of this with their children. And to all the kids that spoke, I also know that, for a lack of a better word, it stinks to miss things like graduations, prom, class trips. And as parents, we want to see those social opportunities offered as well. But in listening to people speak earlier, I actually wrote down the number that it took 47 minutes for people to acknowledge at any point that we're in the middle of a pandemic. And this is not a punishment that is being given. It is not any sort of ill will. Every one of you even are on the school board as a way to support our community. And so as people are not having families at their weddings or not having their partners at their birth, that I don't know if missing social opportunities, while yes, it's great for our mental health, our mental health won't matter if the physical health isn't there. And I also want to really thank the superintendent, because after seeing your presentation, I feel full confidence, as my daughter is a fully remote student, that you are doing your best to have everyone's best interest. And I also want to acknowledge what Mr. Rodriguez said. There's no perfect solution that fits everyone's situation. And sadly, the public school system has always been that case. I do feel that more attention should be given to putting resources for us to be able to better the virtual experience for those who are fully remote, for those who have that option. Going to Casco Bay, they are going back for 3 hours. We made that choice because I'm not putting my kid on a public bus to go to school to do team building activities, to then take the bus back. So I understand that there has to be a compromise in us making that transition, also to lower that impact of going back to in-person learning full time. But on doing that a second day, as opposed to extending the day to a full length day, and now my daughter being full-time remote, during that time when people are doing team building activities, she's just set on a camera to watch what's happening, or put into this cluster of kids to just they're almost just thrown an activity to keep them busy. And maybe that's a Casco Bay issue separately. But I did want to note that. And I like the focus on the synchronous learning as well, because it does add to that experience for her to have that inclusion. So I do want to stress the public bus situation as well, because I think it hasn't really been brought up at all, but it is another way of exposure. And I also want to really press the point that I feel, and I hope this isn't taken the wrong way by parents, but that as parents, we are pushing a lot onto the school board and to teachers. And I feel personally that the school board should be doing the best they can. However, the mention of training our teachers, I feel like the school board should be giving our teachers all the resources they can and the training that they can, so that they in turn can do the best they can with the students when they have them during that time. But as parents, it is my job to make sure my kid is attending school. It is my job to be checking their grades, to be making sure that they're doing the things that they should be doing. My daughter has outside time every day. My daughter has a routine. All of those things as parents, I think, are important. Not to say that there aren't other factors that make that more difficult.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but your time is up. Do you need an extension?
No, that's okay. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you so much. Next, we're going to move to Erin Chase. Erin, you have the floor.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay, great. So my name is Erin Chase. I live at 6 Deepwood Drive. I have 3 children who attend Portland Public Schools, one of whom is a junior at Portland High School. I think it's important that I speak, but after hearing the presentation tonight and the emphasis on barriers, I feel like my advocacy is not going to make a difference. I kind of already feel defeated, but I owe it to my children and my community to share my perspective. I worked in the education field for almost 30 years, including years as a teacher and as a school administrator. Because of these experiences, I have some understanding of the challenge our administration is currently facing. I also think I can understand some of the safety concerns continually expressed by school staff and the PEA. Any comments or questions I have about the operation of our schools come with great respect for our school staff and administration. However, tonight I'm speaking to you as a parent prioritizing the education of my children. I'm in agreement that it is necessary to increase in-person learning time for our high school students in grades 10 through 12. However, I am not in agreement with the limited schedule proposed in the current plan. I support a more robust hybrid schedule like that for students in grades pre-K through 9. I appreciate that Superintendent Patana and the school board are considering the data that when schools follow the CDC guidelines, school transmission of COVID-19 is at a lower rate than the community at large. I also know that the district acknowledges the detrimental impact that limited in-person and full remote instruction has upon academic achievement, student social emotional well-being, and future financial success for students and the community at large. I believe most of us share these truths. My disagreement comes with the proposal for such minimal addition of in-person experiences. Portland is the only district in Maine that still requires its students to learn virtually. There are larger high schools in Portland, Deering and Casco Bay, who have not only managed a hybrid schedule, but are now even considering ways to increase their time. I still don't completely understand the unique circumstances Portland high schools experience that prevent the adoption of a hybrid schedule. I did wait to make my comment so I could absorb the superintendent's plan and comment more intelligently. Earlier, a parent mentioned that he felt there has been a breakdown in communication, and perhaps that is what is leading to parent frustration. I had hoped to hear more technical information about the barriers to offering a hybrid schedule like the other Maine schools. Has a facility study occurred to consider maximizing all potential space in the district? Maybe it has. I just don't know about it. Is it accurate that the PEA negotiated that students and staff always maintain 6-foot distance, despite some flexibility from the CDC in some circumstances? Is this one of the major barriers to in-person learning? Is this what Mr. Rodriguez was referring to? The community deserves to hear the truth about any PEA negotiations and the impact upon school reopening.
Erin, your time is up. Do you need an extension?
I need maybe like a minute.
Okay, is there a motion from the board? I see Ms. Bondo, seconded by Mr. Burke. All in favor? Okay, Ms. Chase, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Several students have commented tonight on the challenges with mastering the content of their classes in an abbreviated format. I share the concerns. Did you know that currently our high school students are getting about 40% of the instructional time per class as compared to a typical class schedule? And this is 40% remotely, which we all know is different than the in-person format in which most students learn best. Just to put in perspective, a typical 6-class high school schedule, which we had pre-COVID, provides approximately 2,250 minutes of in-person instruction per week. Currently, students are receiving only 960 minutes of instruction per week in a remote format. Are students in grades 10 through 12 needing to move at a faster pace than usual to cover 100% of the content in 40% of the time? Or are they not getting to all the standards they are expected to learn? Will they be prepared for their post-secondary plans, whether it's work, military, adult vocational training programs, or college? I suppose that at this point in the year, it would be impossible to create a new schedule to include more time, but at least having more in-person connection may make learning more accessible. In closing, I just want to say that I continually support Portland Public Schools. I'm a believer in public schools. For the first time ever, I'm not feeling that Portland has my children's best interest in mind. Please listen to the voices that support returning to a full-day hybrid in-person learning schedule. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you so much, Erin. Now we're going to hear from Anne-Marie Gribben-Bouchard. Anne-Marie, you have as much as up to 3 minutes to address the board.
All right. Hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. My name is Anne-Marie Gribben-Bouchard, and I live at 54 9th Street. I am a member of the parent advocacy group called Back to School Portland. I have a senior and a sophomore at Portland High School and a 6th grader at Lincoln Middle School. I am disappointed and frustrated with your proposed plan to bring 10th through 12th graders back to school in person. The plan has really not changed since November. This plan calls for a non-mandatory, glorified study hall. Only a small percentage of these students will be able to attend these in-person learning centers due to transportation and motivation, as they are not mandatory. I see the next steps in your PowerPoint, but how long will it take to get through these next steps? We need these kids back in school now. We need a set planned date and a concrete plan. Students are suffering academically, socially, emotionally, and psychologically. Kids are isolated and not motivated. I personally know students that have sought therapy from isolation and not being in school. It seemed in poor taste to state in your plan that there's little empirical evidence that the spike in mental health concern is manifesting in an increase in suicide attempts. Are you actually waiting for this to happen? I am unclear as to why space is an issue at Portland and Deering. Within the past 2 years, there was talk of consolidating the 2 high schools because they were well below capacity. Since the pandemic, we are told that we cannot accommodate a hybrid model due to space limitation. That makes no sense. We are comparable in size and space to area high schools. I understand that Portland Public Schools has spent millions of dollars retrofitting buildings to be safe, improving ventilation, refurbishing classrooms, spreading out new work-alone desks, and set up outdoor teaching areas. I read tonight that the bulk of money went to pay for staff to help us reopen schools. How does this spending benefit 10th through 12th graders? I don't see this equity. I am a lifelong resident of Portland and a proud graduate of Portland High School. And this is the first time I have had negative feelings towards the city and our school system. I am urging you to rework the plan and bring our 10th through 12th grade students back to school in person under a true hybrid model as everyone else in our state. Let's do this now. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne Marie. Next, we'll hear from Tina Bonnie, sorry about that.
Hi there, this is Tina Bonnie. I live on Shepherd Lane, and I am the mom of a recent 2020 Portland High graduate, as well as a junior at Portland High. And I want to speak tonight in favor of increasing in-person time, as you've heard from pretty much 98% of the other parents and students who've spoken. And part of my issues are not to do with social issues or, having time with friends, but the fact that I feel that my highly motivated junior, who at one point in time said he wanted to go to MIT, and I just don't see that anymore from him. And he's in AP classes, and as someone just recently said, they're in school for 40% of the time that they would have normally been. I have no idea how he is going to score on those tests. He didn't do as well on his AP tests last year because of the, quick cutoff to school. That was understandable, but I feel like he's not getting the material. I don't know how he's going to do when he decides to head to college. And it's extremely concerning to me. He wants to be back in school. He says everybody he knows wants to be back in school. And to hear the superintendent say that there's too much that we don't know, that we're continuing to research this. We're continuing to have groups and meetings. And I just feel like there's no timeline. There's no, we don't know the concrete details underneath the big picture plans. And I get that it's hard and it's complicated, but we need to do this. And we are not going to know all the answers until we get in there and start doing it. And I just feel like it would really help our kids and our parents and our community if we could say, this is the plan and we are going to implement it by this date is our goal. And we need a goal, we need a timeline. And I feel very defeated as well, like another parent said. I just feel like nothing I say will make a difference. So I hope that the board listens to these comments and really tries to work hard to get our kids in school more as quickly as possible. So I really appreciate your time and all the work that you guys are doing to do this. And I know it's hard, but we need to get going on it. So thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Next, we're going to hear from Olivia Bean. Olivia, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Olivia Bean. I live on Casco Street,
And I am also a teacher at Portland High, where so many people seem to have issues. I'm really frustrated right now. I wrote down some notes so that I could be calmer, but I'm really, really frustrated that so many people who spend hours in a month interacting with a school building have so many opinions. The plan came up because people who work in the building every day and students who go in the building every day have much more input that matters than the parents. You don't go in the school. Who knows what your kid is thinking? They don't tell you everything. I've seen plenty of them playing basketball in their social isolation. So there's that point. Also, the school board, they're lovely people. They do not have all the facts. The administration has a lot more of them than they do. So this call for them to make a decision is absurd when they have less information and you claim you want more information. There can't be a solid date for anything because nothing stays the same. Every time I make a lesson plan, something changes. One day, I have all of my students. I'm a ninth grade teacher. Then there's a case. Then people have to quarantine. 17 kids are gone and there are only 2 people in front of me. Now we've disrupted what I had planned. So now this learning that you want isn't happening. And we're risking more cases. Also, somehow people forgot that there are asymptomatic cases. So whatever number we have is not an accurate picture because no one's testing everyone all the time. Also, something important that's not being really weighted enough, the superintendent has tried to emphasize, is by getting this in-person time, you are losing synchronous time. If you think being at home and learning sucks, imagine never getting to talk to your teacher or just emails. It is impossible to do both at once well, or one group gets some synchronous, one doesn't. You're just taking one egg and putting it in another basket, and neither one is going to help you make a meal. Cases are where they are also because we've followed the precautions that we've followed. We have had a number of cases. The number would be even larger if there were more students, and it would multiply more quickly.
Ms. Bean?
Yep.
You are out of time. Would you like an extension?
I would love one.
Okay. Is there a motion? I see Mr. Burke, seconded by Mr. Irish. All in favor? Okay. Go ahead, Ms. Bean. You have up to 3 additional minutes.
Thank you. There's also to mention that you're assuming your children are following all the requirements of wearing their mask and staying 6 feet apart. It's not happening. It's not realistic for teenagers to do. They're trying really hard, but it's not possible. So there's another layer of risk there that we haven't thought about. And this whole thing about space, when those analyses were done that said we were using way more space than we needed, that was with desks at the normal distance. Now they have to be 6 feet apart. Normally I could probably fit 30 kids in my room to meet the 6 feet requirement. And I mean, I'm using every single inch. I can only fit 18. That's almost half. And I know for a fact we can't squeeze more kids in because my principal went around with the custodian during the summer and counted how many seats could fit in every single room. And then she asked us all to double check. So this plan is not coming out of nowhere. There are thoughts behind it. Also, there's a pandemic everywhere. No one's going to do well academically. Everyone's going to fail their AP test. It just is what it is. The whole situation sucks. And last, almost done because I'm sure I'm out of time. the people who are speaking do not have as many issues as the people who are not able to speak. There are many parents who maybe they feel the same, maybe they don't. I don't know, because they're at work right now. There are many of my kids who, they're ninth graders, even though they have hybrid school, they can't come to school when one of the elementary schools shuts down because they have to babysit, because there's no childcare. You kids and transportation, transportation is equally as hard in the morning as it is in the afternoon. I don't know why that's an argument that you should switch something. And most importantly, again, I want people who have the most information and who will be impacted the most to make the most noise. So if students say they want to go back loudly and clearly, all of them, great. But parents, I'm sorry, but you don't really matter here because you're not thinking of the big picture. You're thinking of your kid. And that's just not, there's way more to other people's stories than yours. It's a pandemic. It sucks. We all have things we want. I'd love to have all my kids in person. Honestly, right now, if it would stop the bickering, I would take them all. But that's not what we can do. That's not the plan that's realistic. I'm sure the superintendent and the rest of the admin team has tried very hard to make a plan that works because, my God, are you people annoying? So I know for a fact that they've tried. Like, imagine all the phone calls and emails. It's not like they don't hear you. So they've definitely tried. So I'm sure I'm out of time by now.
You are out of time.
Yep.
Thank you so much for your comments tonight.
Oh my gosh.
We're going to now move to Cindy Russell. Cindy, go ahead.
You can hear me?
Yes.
My name is Cindy Russell, and I live at 60 Barrel Street. I have a 9th grader in Ms. Bean's class. I have a 12th grader at Portland High School as well. I'm part of the Back to School advocacy group. I am in favor of returning all high school students to in-person learning, in the very least, in a full day in-person hybrid model to be in line with all the other high schools in the state. I listened to the report you provided, and I hear you provide excuses why we can't get our 10 to 12 kids into school. Yet what you reported indicates that we should be doing everything, certainly way more than what we've been doing to date to get our kids in school. These disconnected learners, the absenteeism rate, coupled with increases in mental health issues, degraded social well-being, and the fact that we're not providing adequate educational time are horrifying facts. And I'm shocked that there doesn't seem to be an overwhelming disgust that you are failing our kids and not giving these kids the option to be in school. If kids don't want to be in school, that is their choice, but at least give kids who want the option to be there the opportunity. I also want to point out a comment that Mr. Gomez made earlier, that in-person learning has propelled learning for ELL learners this year. Shouldn't we want to propel learning for all of our students? The fact that you're presenting a regurgitated model of what was presented in November and have relabeled it as second help in learning indicates to me that you had no intention of returning 10th to 12th grade students to in-person learning this year. You should be further along in your planning than you are now. You are putting all of our children at an enormous disadvantage socially, emotionally, and academically. A plan to get our 10th to 12th graders in school needs to happen as soon as possible, and there needs to be greater transparency in your communication and a plan with dates. We need you, our board, to step up and hold the administration accountable. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Cindy. Next, we're going to hear from Lauren Dietland. Lauren, the floor is yours. You have up to 3 minutes to address the board.
Hi, thanks. You can hear me okay?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for adjusting the agenda this evening so we can respond to the plan. I wanted to start by saying that my understanding of the plan is that the 4 blocks in the afternoon are actual class instruction, and I hope that that is correct, because I want to acknowledge that at the very least that would be an improvement over the Learning Center model at Portland High School, which has mostly been used for administering tests, though even that block plan is still insufficient, but I do want to acknowledge that it would be an improvement. I'm not going to spend a lot of time making the case for more instruction and in-person learning, because that case has been made clearly both by the many students and parents who have already spoken, as well as by the plan itself and by your presentation, Superintendent Botana. I urge you to please implement this plan for classes in the afternoons immediately. I do understand the challenges that we're facing, but it is unconscionable that there is not yet a timeline for this plan. Many of us have been actively asking for a plan since August. These kids have been out of school for nearly a year. If there is planning happening now, it should be directed at figuring out how to get 10th to 12th graders back for some full days. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little worked up. It's been very upsetting. I second Aaron Chase's call for transparency around negotiations with the teachers union. No one is talking about the fact that the MOU with the teachers union requires 6 feet of distance. That is my understanding. I would encourage you to consider renegotiating the terms of that memorandum of operations, or whatever it's called, of understanding with the union, so that you have greater flexibility in getting our kids back to school. In-school transmission is very low in Maine schools, which have 3 feet required between students and 6 feet between the teacher and students. The transmission risk is low and is very significantly outweighed by the many emotional and academic risks to our children that you've been hearing about from parents and kids. And parents' voices do matter. As it turns out, kids don't get to make the decisions for themselves. That's why they're children and minors, and adults get to make a lot of decisions about what's important for their kids. And that is why we all feel it's important to weigh in, and why you've been hearing so much from many of us. Superintendent Botana and members of the school board, you know what our students need. I heard a lot tonight about what is not possible. Every other district in the state has figured this out. I implore you to do the right thing and figure out what is possible. School board members, I echo the sentiments of others when I say that I urge you to consider rescinding your blanket authorization that the superintendent can do as he would like if you are not in agreement with his plan and actions, and to please require him and the administration whatever needs to be done to get our 10th to 12th graders back to school. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Lauren. Next, we're going to hear from Brian Bouchard. Brian, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Brian Bouchard. I live at 54 9th Street. I'm a member as well of the parent advocacy group called Back to School Portland. Like Anne Marie, I have a senior and a sophomore and a 6th grader. I want to comment on the update to the reopening for the 10th through 12th graders back to school in person. First, I want to applaud the 14 students that spoke up earlier tonight that are pleading to go back to school in person. I really hope the board really took their words and passion about going back to school and back to school in person learning. It honestly brought tears to my eyes. And I think throughout the night it has. The reopening plan is the same plan from November, as we all know. I am baffled that the school board has not been meeting regularly to come up with a better plan and with an aggressive timeline. We need a plan that provides in-school instruction that is the same, if not better, as K through 9. In-school instruction is not a learning center. Let's be clear. Many parents have emailed the board. You know that. You've said it multiple times tonight. I've been on the news. Many parents have been on the news. Many people have been in the papers. I've been in the papers, voicing the need for in-person instruction for these students. But it's clear our voices have gone on deaf ears. Please listen to us. We do deserve respect. Why do we not count in this decision? It makes no sense to me. I believe that the teachers union is a major factor in stalling things. Teachers, all of our children need to be back in the classroom. At this point, I honestly don't care whether you are physically there or not, but these kids need to be back. If any teachers can't come in and need to stay remote, we ask that you advocate for remote for yourself, but let these students get back in the classroom with a proctor. Heck, I would take vacation time from my demanding job to be a proctor. I bet I'm not the only parent. Please advocate for our students to return to school safely and be given the same opportunity the rest of the schools in Maine have been given. I understand the importance of the union for many reasons. I grew up in a union home myself, but this has negatively impacted our children, which is the reason schools even exist. Our students have to be the priority this time. There are viable, proven solutions. This is completely feasible, as all other schools in Maine have figured this out. Our students need to be in person much more than 2 hours a day, 2 days a week. Please make a real plan. This needs to happen yesterday. Finally, parents need to be heard. We ask to meet with you because we want to have an intelligent conversation with you. To date, this has been either denied or has again been on deaf ears.
Brian, you are out of time.
I just have one more sentence. Let's bring these students back now, and with a solid plan and have a board vote on it. The board needs to vote on this, not one person. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Brian. We're now going to hear from Jeremy Stein. Jeremy, go ahead. Jeremy, it looks like you're muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you.
No problem.
My name is Jeremy Stein, and I live on Gray Street. I have a 10th and 12th graders at Portland High, one of who spoke earlier tonight. The other was representing Portland High School at the varsity basketball game earlier today. I'm also a member of the Back to School Portland group. I'd like to advocate for returning the 10th to 12th graders to in-person school on a full hybrid 2 full days per week, like every other school in Maine, starting immediately. Our kids' mental health has taken a giant toll over this past years of isolation. They are not the only ones. There have been a number of national studies documenting alarming rates of anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation in teenagers. Also, rising rates of drug use. I'd be happy to share these articles with anyone who'd like to read them. I personally know a number of Portland kids who have been hospitalized due to suicide ideation in the past few months. This is reason for great concern. The rates of teen suicides nationwide are up. Social isolation is a huge factor. Schools provide necessary peer and adult support. When kids are struggling, their teachers notice. Guidance counselors and social workers get involved. But without in-person instruction, some of these kids just get lost. Kids need structures. Schools provide this. With real school, kids out of their beds, out of their pajamas, out of their rooms, out of the house in the sunlight. This routine is crucial for their mental health. Our kids have not been in school for a full year. School provides a chance for social interactions that are crucial for kids. This happens in and out of the classroom. Providing 10 hours of Zoom instruction a week does not meet the mental health needs. These kids are living their lives on Zoom. How many kids have their cameras off during class? This allows kids to retreat from human interactions and sink further into isolation and despair. I know a number of 12th graders who have totally given up. How many kids are not going to graduate or go on to higher ed due to Portland schools completely forsaking them? I am a teacher in a neighboring district. We've had some teachers who are reluctant to come back to school in person, and the more they did it and they saw it's possible, the more comfortable they got with it. We all agree that in-person instruction is far more effective than remote learning. The kids want to be there and gladly follow the rules, wear their masks, wipe the tables when they leave. The legacy for Portland seniors is that the administration did not care about them enough to give them any senior year. No other seniors in the state have had this taken away from them. What are our priorities? The time to make this happen is now. I respectfully request you vote for a true hybrid education model instead of the superintendent's plan, 2 full days a week in person. We know that if you don't vote to begin a hybrid schedule now, there will be no real school for the kids this year. Representative Thompson asked about a time frame. If you do vote for the superintendent's plan, please vote that starts immediately. We do not need the superintendent's next steps to study this further. These next steps will only delay what is long, long overdue. 1 40-minute class per week is not enough face time for students. Acknowledging that this is stepping stone to full hybrid starting before Q4. This is not the final step of the year. Superintendent Botano, Principals Jepson, Ahmed, Peters, school board members, our kids' mental health are in your hands. Please do the right thing. Allow our students to come to school 2 full days a week. This is necessary. Start this immediately. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jeremy. Next, we're going to hear from Aaron Brennan. Aaron, you can go ahead. Aaron, you're unmuted, but we don't hear you. Let's go to the next person. And Aaron, maybe we can work on your audio and come back, or you can work on your audio and we can come back to you. Let's go next to Teresa. Sorry, Teresa, go ahead, Teresa.
Hi. My name, can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Teresa LaGrange. I live at 55 Madeline Street in Portland. I am part of the Back to School Portland group. I have a son that's a senior. He has been in high school twice since March. And one was for taking a test. I am for more in-person learning than is being proposed. I did some calling the last couple of weeks, and I did talk to Lewiston High School's vice principal, Jay Dufour, and they aren't doing 6 feet. They're doing at least 3 feet, 6 feet when it can be 6 feet. But he told me that any given day, there's 700 to 800 kids in their high school. They have 1,500 students total. And it's been working. You know, they have had some cases. They've had a few teachers that have had COVID, but they got it outside of school, he told me. They taped off the hallways for directional to help students know which direction to go in. And he would be happy to speak to anyone, visit. I think it would be a great idea for you to go see what they're doing at that high school, because it is a lot bigger than ours. And they're making it work, and they're actually going to go to school on Wednesdays. They're proposing that soon. And I did call the Civic Center Management Group, and they would be happy to talk to Portland about using that space, which would be more space for kids to be spread out. You know, the city is our campus. That can be used for Portland to spread classes out. I can give anyone his name. He would be happy to talk to anyone in the school. And I also talked to Nick about the fields in Parks and Rec. And, fields could be used for gym class coming up. It's almost March. We need to get creative with this because we need the kids in school. And the fact that Portland is listening to the state's requirement on athletics, but not in-person school, I don't know, it just kind of shocks me that athletics is before education needs. I know you're all working hard. I just am really frustrated with my senior has been in school twice since March. And to close, I just, again, want to say the kids need to be in school for their mental health, for socialization, their personality is still developing. They need to see other people.
Teresa, you are out of time. Do you need an extension?
No, I think I covered everything. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks so much. Next, we're going to try to go back to Erin Brennan. Erin, it looks like your phone is muted, but you should be able to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead, Erin.
Okay, great, thanks. I'm not going to say anything new. I'm glad you're all still awake. I'm another parent from the Back to School Portland group. I want to mention that teacher that spoke was quite disrespectful, and I just want to make a point of saying that parents' voices do matter. Actually, we are the parents. From all of the people who have spoken prior to me, it's obvious that you're clearly failing us. You're clearly failing the students, and you're clearly failing the community. We haven't spoken about the community and the impacts on the community, but this is going to be incredibly negative in the long term. No question about it. It's time to listen to us. This is hard. This is complicated, as we've been told by you and Botana and all of you. But other districts have figured it out. In fact, all districts have figured it out, except for Portland Public Schools. Why? You're failing us. You're failing us now. Let's start, as Michael Horaceberger said earlier, now, rather than losing another 6 months to hand-wringing. When will we start? As Jessica Townsend asked, what do you need? What do you need from us? We're here. We're willing to give. We're willing to help. We're willing to take time off from our jobs to help out. Use us. Leverage us. If this is a union issue, the elephant in the room, let's revisit the contract. Fear is different from science. As pointed out in a recent New York Times article, fear is driving the union. Let's point them back to the science. Let's get back to the table with them. We as a community have never faced an issue such as this. I don't understand the governance around this, but why does this not require a special session? A board vote over a definitive plan rather than delegating your power to leadership that is not affecting appropriate action. To Alex Posey's point earlier, he said, I'm just confused about the lack of communication regarding this plan. Just confused. We've heard that over and over again. Where is the good communication? As Eva, Silas's mom, this was killer. She's thankful for the increased video gaming time because it gives her kids socialization. That is failure. Whoever says that? Whoever is happy about increased video time? That's failure, people. Lydia Stein, awesome student. She said, I have given up. How does that feel hearing that? Do we want a more serious case on our hands? We're so fortunate that we have not experienced a suicide to date. Let's not get to that point, please. What are we waiting for? What is the timing to get to at least 2 days of meaningful academic time? Let's start now. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Next, we're going to hear from Gabby Daniels. Gabby, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Hi, my name's Gabby Daniels. I'm a junior at Portland High, and I live on Barclay Ave. I'm going to take this opportunity to be brutally honest. Since last March, students' education has taken a huge hit. And tonight, a teacher I thought highly of had the nerve to say every student is going to fail the AP exams. This makes my blood boil, and I take huge offense because we learn the best we can out of the circumstances, and I never thought a teacher would expect us to fail, especially since the teachers are the ones preparing us for these exams. Online learning should be an option, not a requirement. The students and teachers who want to stay remote can stay remote, but we need the opportunity to start going back in person. The amount of technical issues that has been going on this year is atrocious. The fact our learning relies on whether or not our internet is working is alarming. All our lives, doctors have been telling us no more than 2 hours a day of screen time. Now all of a sudden, that has gone out the window. As a result of all this extra screen time, I've been experiencing digital eye strain. 40-minute online learning blocks is not enough time to learn. Teachers I've had openly admitted to having to cut important things from our curricular because of time restraints remote learning has caused. High school is supposed to be preparing us for our future, and the administration is failing us in that department. Our mental health of many students has declined during this time. This affects our learning abilities and our motivation and desire to learn. As a member of the Portland High School girls basketball team, we have been following all the CDC guidelines in order for us to be allowed to play. Why is it a close contact sport like basketball is allowed to be in session when our own schooling isn't? Education should be valued way over sports. I never thought my education would come second to sport. I believe the administration has failed the 10th and 12th graders, especially, and my heart goes out to my fellow classmates and seniors whose year has been stripped away from high school memories and been directly impacted by the atrocity of remote learning. Please take the voices of the students who spoke tonight into your consideration. It has been extremely tiring and frustrating not having our voices taken into a serious account. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabby. Next, we're going to hear from Patty Gallant. Patty, go ahead.
Thank you. This is Patty Gallant, and I am on Carter Street in Portland. I have a freshman at Portland High, and so she is, I guess you'd call her one of the lucky ones because she's going 2 days a week, but 3 hours a day is not really a full day. I've been a parent in the Portland school system for 21 years. When my son entered into Portland schools back in 2000, I could never imagine a better school system. I couldn't imagine living anywhere else other than Portland. I raved about the school system. It wasn't perfect. No school system is perfect, right? So you're going to have, 200 kids in a class, and you will never get all the kids and parents to agree on everything. But what was different than now, and I saw this shift happen when my daughter went into middle school, teachers aren't different. She has the same teachers my son had at Portland High, many of them. Administrators, some of them are different, but it's a great administrative group. What is different is the school board and the superintendent. So I don't know if that is the common denominator, but I do know that I have seen a downward spiral in terms of how conversations are handled within Portland schools. This conversation is reminiscent of last year, and anybody who participated in or attempted to participate in the SRO conversation, if you disagreed, you were belittled, you were called racist. I don't want to relive that because, it just was a horrible memory, and unfortunately it was actually surfaced again tonight with one of the board members. Tonight, this conversation with back to school is similar. It's very different in that our hands have been tied by COVID. I understand that. But it is very similar in terms of the lack of collaboration. We have Mr. Bertano saying, that you had a good handle on what parents felt. That's why the box was green. You don't have a good handle on what parents are feeling. You may have after tonight. We have teachers saying our kids are going to fail AP, and parents don't have a say. We damn well do have a say, and we should have a say. We all should have a say. This should be collaborative. It should be a conversation that should have evolved over the past several months and not just be a plan that was implemented off the cuff. So it seems, I know it has not been. I know there's been a lot of work, but there's a difference between working hard and working smart. And working smart needs to include involving everybody and having all the voices heard before a decision is made. And then the board giving the superintendent the overarching decision for this is a huge mistake. And that needs to change. It doesn't matter to anybody on the board, but I never thought I would say this. I have a for sale sign going on my house next month, and I am going to, by the start of next school year, my daughter, who I never imagined would want to leave Portland High School, cannot wait to leave for many reasons. This is one of them.
Right.
Patty, you are out of time. Do you need an extension?
No, but I'd like to know who just made that comment.
That was someone's microphone going off. It was not directed towards you.
Huh.
Okay, thank you so much, Patty. And now we are going to move to Grayson. Grayson, you have 3 minutes to address the board.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right. Hi, my name is Grayson Soldati. I'm a senior at Deering High School. I live on Woodvale Street. I've lost my senior year and feel hopeless and feel as if no one is listening. We are the only district in Maine that is not going in person, and it is very frustrating and upsetting to see other schools figuring it out and we still can't seem to. As I'm thinking about college next year, I'm feeling very unprepared and scared. I've not gotten the help or resources I need to take this important step in my life. I'm a varsity athlete. I don't understand how we are playing sports, but cannot attend school. I was given the choice to play sports, so I feel as though we should be given the choice to go to school. I feel as though you have failed the seniors and all students, and I really hope you listen to our voices as we are all struggling with remote learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Grayson. Next, we're going to hear from Jim. Jim, you have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name's Jim McGowan. I live at 44 Clapboard Road in Portland. I have a daughter who's a junior at high school, and I have a son who's an 8th grader at Lyman Moore. I'm just going to be honest that I was really hopeful to get more out of tonight's meeting and the session. Some time ago, before or when the pandemic first hit and we had to go to remote, I would say I had 100% confidence in the school board, the superintendent, and the plan. And then as I've seen other surrounding high schools get back to hybrid models, and Portland struggling to move forward, I started to get inquisitive to understand the reasonings why. And unfortunately, to this point, I haven't really gotten any of the answers that I was hopeful for. I'm still not clear as to why Portland High and Deering High cannot operate in a hybrid model when surrounding towns are functioning that also have moving parts and are dealing with the same challenges. And I'm also concerned just from a high level, like some of the debate or comments tonight are almost like remote is better than in person, or which is better. I think the overall goal should be we get back to school 100% in person. I think everybody agrees that's where we all want to be. So why are there not more developed plans that are ready to address this step by step? The fact that we're talking today about understanding what it's going to take to get to hybrid, what was everybody doing the last 6 months? I understand circumstances change, but if the plan's always to get back in person, how have we not uncovered these challenges or tried to work around them already? Like the fact that we now have to wait to understand more of what needs to be done to get back in person makes no sense. And if I'm thinking logically, which I'm sure everybody is, how is that possible? How are we not failing our students and our community if we don't even have a plan? We have a proposal, but we don't even know how that's going to be rolled out. So my question is, I have no confidence in what the next step is. I have zero confidence that we're going to be back in September. Like, as a Portland parent, am I now supposed to be looking at where should I put my kid in school next year because Portland isn't providing me the educational opportunities that I need? Do I need to go to a private school now? Do I need to try to relocate where I live to get my kids the education they deserve? I mean, that's the situation that we're in. Every other high school in Maine has found a way. And all I've heard tonight is excuses and reasons why we can't.
Jim, your time is up. Do you need an extension?
I'd like another minute, please.
I see a motion from Thompson. Is there a second? I see Ms. Bondo. All in favor? Okay, Jim, go ahead.
So I'm not doubting the challenges that are out there. I'm not doubting that you're dealing maybe with the teachers union or people wanting to be remote, but it's every one of your jobs to advocate for the students and to make something happen. And how you can not want to do that is beyond me. So I'd like to have more confidence in what's going to happen next, but I have to be honest, after tonight, I feel like this year's a wash. I feel like I'm just hopeful maybe kids will have some in person at the beginning of next year, but I don't see a plan or any confidence that that's going to happen. So I would like to have a lot of those answers, my questions answered, and understand, how is Lewiston? You know, how is South Portland? How are those schools doing it? Have we gone in there? Have we met with them? What are the differences? Communicate with the parents. I want to know the reasons why we're not there. So please, whatever your next steps are, communicate with the community, communicate with the parents, communicate with the students in full transparency, all of the items that are at play. I heard tonight, I think it was, I can't remember what board member, but it's clear to me after listening tonight that the teachers union is a big barrier. That's the first I'm hearing of this. Why is this not information that's being shared prior to? It's very disheartening. So I'm hopeful that you guys can come together as a unit and do what's right for the parents, do what's right for the students, do what's right for the community. But I mean, that's all that I have for a comment. So I appreciate the time this evening and look forward to next steps.
Thank you, Jim. Next, we're going to hear from Ashley Daniels. Ashley, please go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Ashley Daniels. I live on Barclay Ave in Portland, and I'm a junior at Portland High School as well as a student council representative. And I'm very strongly advocating for an in-person learning option for the many of us who need to be back in school. As mentioned before, students in grades 10 through 12 are receiving less than half of their usual class time. We are getting half a school year. This is not satisfactory enough for us to learn what we should be learning. Teachers in pretty much all of my classes this year have had to make cuts to our curriculum, therefore reducing our education to fit the limited time we've been given this year. In addition to having half a school year, we are learning completely remote from our homes. Technical difficulties, difficulties at home, difficulties with social and emotional well-beings are all examples and reasons why students would not perform to the best of their ability at home. Personally, I struggle with migraines, and they're triggered by excess screen time and stress. Since remote learning began, I've had to get medicine and special blue light blocking glasses to prevent me from feeling like my head is going to implode. This is not a way I want to live. I want to go back to school, get away from Google Meets, and back into a classroom where we go to learn. I believe the proposed plan is not enough. Adding 80 minutes to our school day seems like a waste of time to me and to my peers. 80 additional minutes would be great if we were in person all day, but I am not going to spend 50 minutes of my day traveling between home and school for a second helping of my morning classes. To discuss the topic of Learning Center, in my experience with Learning Center, it is the equivalent of staying after school for help. It is not required weekly for me. In fact, I'm only invited to Learning Center for in-person tests or labs. This schedule of remote learning is just not working for me. I need hands-on interactive learning where I can look my teachers and classmates in the eye and get the same quality education I was promised when I chose to go to a Portland high school. Right now, I would say teachers are doing their best with the situation we are in, but the overall quality of the content I am learning is not the same as it would be if I was in school, and this bothers me. As a junior, I am in the most important year that colleges will look at to see if I've grown. I can honestly say that I feel like I have not grown because I'm only getting half an education and I am not even physically in school. I just want to acknowledge the graphs we saw earlier tonight. The graph showed a comparison between the performance of ninth graders that are hybrid and the 10th through 12th graders who are fully remote. If anything, we should be looking at the performance of each class from last year to right now, because I would bet money that we have decreased. Furthermore, teachers this year will possibly be writing recommendations for colleges, scholarships, jobs, etc. And I feel, yes.
Your time is up. Would you like an extension?
Yes, please.
Is there a motion from the board? I see Mr. Youssef, seconded by Ms. Thompson. All in favor? Okay, Ashley, you have up to 3 more minutes.
All right, thank you. Okay, so furthermore, teachers this year will possibly be writing recommendations for colleges, scholarships, jobs, etc. And I feel like I've barely gotten to know my teachers. This is not ideal and can be solved if we went back to school. As a student who is taking 3, would have been 4 AP classes if we had not been remote, I do not plan on failing my AP exams. I've realized that with our current plan, working with 40% of our usual class time, I'm going to have to really push myself in a time where my education is not full. To conclude, I would just like to point out that this meeting has lasted double our usual school day, and I have not seen any surveys come from the district asking students if we would like to return to school. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. Next, we're going to hear from Kevin Viola. Kevin, you have 3 minutes to address the board.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead.
I just want to say thank you to all the members of the school board and to Superintendent Fontana for holding this meeting. I'll try to keep it under the 3-minute limit. I agree with everyone that has spoken this evening as far as all the parents and the students are concerned. Again, my name is Kevin Viola. I live at 102 Greenwood Lane. I have a junior and a freshman at Casco Bay High School, and I have a 6th grader at Lyman Moore Middle School. All the comments and all the stats, the facts, the vaccine, everything that's been brought up or not brought up as far as where we are today, a plan would be most beneficial and dates with a goal in mind to get these students back in school learning. Just comparing the rest of the school districts in the state and the country, the lower levels of COVID and everything that's been discussed this evening, just for the fact that these kids need in-class learning. The issues that have been brought up this evening have really been eye-opening. A lot of good points from everyone. And I would really encourage the school board and the superintendent to revisit the plan to make it happen. All these obstacles and challenges and all these things that seem to be a hurdle, those all can be looked on as opportunities. And I think that I've heard a lot of parents state that they'd be more willing to work with the school board, work with the superintendent on helping, assisting, anything that we can do as a community to advocate and assist in making this successful for these most important, the subject of this call or Zoom meeting is our children, our students. So again, thank you for the opportunity to discuss this. And again, in school, in class learning, 2 full days, just like the other school districts. We can learn from them, they can learn from us. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Seeing no other hands raised, I'm going to close the public comment period. I want to thank everyone who listened in to the call tonight and everyone who participated. I do see one last hand from Carrie Foster, who had her hand up earlier. Carrie, did you want an opportunity to speak? We're just going to move you over really quickly to the panelists. All right, Carrie, are you there? Carrie, do you want to?
Okay, got it. Sorry, I think I've unmuted.
Yep, you are.
Are we good? Okay, thank you. Okay, so, and I appreciate that. I don't know how I put my hand down. But yes, I'm Carrie Foster. I am president of the PEA. And of course, I've been listening all night. And I do want to reiterate that the PEA absolutely does value both student and parent voice. And in fact, we surveyed members recently, and many of them wrote in comments underlining that very idea, that we do want to get everyone's voice at the table and figure out the best option. And our members also do want to find a way to safely get back in the buildings with students. And the vast majority, according to the survey, are ready to have that conversation with the district. And as Superintendent Botana mentioned, we are doing that. We're looking forward to sitting down with district leadership tomorrow to try to figure out some of these spacing and transportation concerns, to try to figure out how in-person time could mean more academic time instead of inadvertently reducing it because of bus schedules or families who might still choose to keep their or their students home. There are a lot of factors, and we are different from districts around us in transportation, in our older buildings, in the spacings and the configuration of the rooms, and in the communication processes. As Carlos presented earlier, we have like 65 languages to translate to make sure our families understand everything that's involved. And it is important for families to understand everything that's involved. But yes, of course, we're willing to have those conversations, and we're looking forward to them. We do want to do what's safest and best. And I just wanted to kind of raise my hand and make that clear, because I'm starting to hear this idea that the teachers union is trying to block any plan to get students back, and that's not the case. We absolutely want to continue to collaborate with the district. We appreciate the opportunity to talk through these concerns, and we certainly value what parents and students are saying. So I just wanted to get that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Okay, now the public comment period is closed. Again, I want to thank everyone for hanging in there through a late night and for sharing your views. Mr. Superintendent, do you want to say anything to close out this section? No. Okay. So we are going to move on, and we're going to skip the reports of the committees due to the late hour and move that to our meeting next week on March 2nd. And so now we're on to consent items. And will the superintendent speak to this item?
Yes, Madam Chair. Under Board Policy KCD, the school board accepts by unanimous consent contributions made to the school district, and as required by that policy, all the donations are listed in the board agenda under this item. Our practice is for each donor to receive a written contribution acknowledgement expressing our heartfelt gratitude, as well as for their tax purposes. So I would like to thank the many generous contributors to the Portland Public Schools who have made donations of durable goods, goods of substantial value and historical or commemorative significance. And those are 2 air purifiers valued at $2,600 from Berlin City Drive for Education. $500 from Berlin City Drive for Education to purchase multilingual books. $1,500 from Berlin City Drive for Education to purchase winter clothing for students in need. $100 for the Portland High School Food Pantry from William Kowalczyk and Jody Holliday, an additional $250 for the PHS Food Pantry from Jody Holliday. Donors choose contributions of $2,479 and $670.88 from Sam Rosenthal from April and Dennis Noonan for the PHS Food Pantry, $2,400 to be used by PHS social workers for the assistance of students in need from PHS teacher Rosalie Lamb and Tony Zepka, and offered gift cards valued at $125 from Talbot teacher Jen Seed, winter coats, boots, hats, and waterproof items valued at $400 from Bill Kowalczyk and Jody Holliday, and an anonymous cash donation of $100 to cover expenses that Presumpscot families may not be able to cover. $94 from Barrett Wilkerson and Catherine Condrit for Miss Majorano's expeditionary learning. Books for kindergarten and pre-K valued at $650 from Martha Gross Altrusa, and 40 plus sneakers of various sizes. games for students and school supplies valued at $1,000 from the Other Maine project of Aid for Kids. We're very grateful to all of these generous contributors for their support and contributions to the Portland Public Schools.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Now we are on to new business, and we have 4 first reads. Just a reminder that there's no public comment or board discussion on first reads. We have the first read of the request to bid renovations at Longfellow Elementary School as part of the Buildings for Our Future referendum. Next is first read of the contract for owner's representative between the Portland Public Schools and CHA Consulting. Next is first read of the contract for commissioning agent for Buildings for Our Future renovations between the Portland Public Schools and Sparhawk Group. And lastly is first read of Portland Public Schools proposed FY22 capital improvement plan to be submitted to the City Council. We don't have any old business or personnel items tonight, so that concludes our business meeting. We did plan 2 workshops after the conclusion of our business meeting, and I just wanted to confirm that we're going to go forward with the BFOF workshop.
If you're looking to me for that, I would say absolutely. We are under a very tight deadline to get the bids out, and it's important for the board to be informed because we won't have an opportunity to do this, again. So I would urge us to move forward and have the presentation on the BFOF for Longfellow. We have next week to actually approve it, and I don't know that you would have an opportunity, if there are any concerns and things along those lines, for us to be able to incorporate them before next week when you would be asked to vote on.
I'm in full agreement. I just wanted to confirm. Are we able to move the CIP workshop to next week?
Yeah, one thing I'll say about the CIP workshop is, I feel we can move forward with a CIP as it currently is. It's, it's been vetted through the operations committee. It's much reduced CIP from what we've submitted in the past. And so if there are any questions about CIP from any of the board members, I guess I would urge you to ask them before next week. We'll review the basics of it when we ask you to vote on it next week. But, if you have concerns about it, please take a look and let us know.
Thank you. And there are extensive support documents on the CIP and in board docs for this week's meeting. Okay, with that, we're ready to adjourn. So just to reiterate, we're going to adjourn, but then we have one workshop that we're going to continue, that we're going to hold tonight. The workshop is on the Longfellow bid and commissioning and building representative contracts. So we're going to consider the Longfellow project and then the two contracts that go along with the BFOF projects. So with that, is there a motion to adjourn the business meeting? I see Mr. Burke, seconded by Mr. Irish. All those in favor? We are adjourned at 12:05 a.m. Thank you so much, everyone.